your cell phones. And I'm also going to ask the staff to remind me about our Zoom participants, since we can't actually see on our screens whether or not we have any. It's important for you to let us know so we can make certain they can get their comments heard before the city. Okay, so after all of that, we will have a roll call.
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Here. Okay, we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on our agenda is going to be oral communications. And this is to give the public an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes on any item that is not on our agenda tonight. Seeing no one in the public, and I assume we don't have any Zoom people. Thank you. So are there, I guess I did this, are there any additions or deletions to our agenda tonight?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
This evening, there's one modification to the agenda. So item 5C for 520 Riverview Drive is asking for a continuance. I just want to give you a slight update on this microphone. The city Public Works Director they'll be doing more analysis on that intersection and looking at the site distance and also a couple other things with possibly modifications to a fence there. So that item is being continued to see if there can be a safe driveway installation on the property. So we'll be bringing that back in April. So tonight we'll be asking for continuance. And we've also received many public comments regarding item 4D for 4401 Capitola Road. I believe we're at 58 public comments for that. That item is beginning at 7 p.m. sharp. That's how we noticed it on the agenda and in the noticing. So that item will begin at 7 p.m. sharp. We'll work through the other 3 items prior.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any commission comments at this time? Any other staff comments?
I did want to inform the Planning Commission and the public that on March 16th, we'll have a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council for our housing element update and looking at the future sites inventory. And there's also a survey online for the housing element update that the public is welcome to participate in. Those are my comments this evening.
So will the meeting on the 16th be an in-person meeting?
In-person meeting, yes,
Okay.
here in council chambers. There's a chance it might be in our community room, but we'll notice it correctly for one or the other, but here at City Hall. And it'll begin at 6 p.m. March 16th.
Okay, thank you. So now we move on to the approval of the minutes. We have minutes for December 1, January 19th, and February 2nd. And I'll ask if anybody has any corrections or deletions to the minutes. I had one for the December 1 meeting. And that was only that I think the headings is listed incorrectly because it lists me as the chairperson. And I think Commissioner Wilkes was still the chair at that time. So with that correction, can we have a motion to?
We weren't at the December 1. So if meeting.
You would need to recuse
You would need
yourself.
to
So we'll
recuse.
vote on December 1 first. I'll move approval.
I move approval of the December 1st meeting minutes with your correction.
Okay. Can you
I'll
second?
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then we will do the January 19th and the February 2nd meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve those?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the January 19th and February 2nd minutes.
A second. And we have a second. So do we need a roll call vote? We're just, yeah. Yeah. Are we all in favor? Aye. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to our consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the Planning Commission to be routine and will be enacted in one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion on these items prior to the time the Planning Commission votes on the action unless members of the public or the Planning Commission request specific items to be discussed for separate review. We only have, looks like the one item. Does anyone wish to pull that item in the audience? It's for 203, the Esplanade. It is a coastal development permit, historical alterations permit for window replacements at Zelda's Restaurant. Anyone on the commission?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we'll probably do, all right, minus what's faster. Is everybody in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to our public hearing section. And public hearings are intended to provide an opportunity for the public to discuss each item. We will go through a process where there's a staff presentation, planning commission questions, public comment, and then planning commission deliberation and decisions. The first item on the agenda is 2000 Wharf Road. It is the Rispin Mansion project. And the city is the applicant on this.
Thank you and good evening. The application before you includes a conditional use permit, a historical alteration permit, and a coastal development permit for the continued restoration and improvement of the grounds at Rispin Park. The project was initially approved by the Planning Commission in 2015 with funding for the initial phase of construction. Work completed under phase one included new ADA accessible pathways at the Clare Street Wharf Road intersection seen here, as well as the entry to Peary Park from Nob Hill Shopping Center. It also included a partial removal of the perimeter wall you see here in order to construct the new ADA pathway at that intersection curb cut. These are photos from 2014 right here, pre-construction. This is 2016 mid-construction and then 2018. With additional funding allocated last year in July by the City Council, the Public Works Department is now pursuing reapproval of the permit by the Planning Commission. The application would not require subsequent approval by City Council. The project will utilize the area between Rispin Mansion and the perimeter wall. This is the majority of that space with a bit on to the left down that cyclone fence. It will create a larger space with new and restored amenities. The park will have typical amenities such as benches, drinking fountains, waste receptacles, security lighting, and bike racks, but it will also feature a new 430 square foot amphitheater next to the mansion itself, a bocce court, children's play area, chess tables, and demonstration gardens for oak trees and monarch butterflies, which are both endemic to this site. With that, staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt the 2015 EIR addendum, which was previously adopted in 2015, and approve the application based on the attached findings, conditions, of approval and EIR mitigations. We also have a Public Works representative, our Kailash Mozumdar. He's the projects manager, available for questions.
Does anyone on the planning commission have any questions of the staff before we open the public hearing?
I do. I just noticed you mentioned water fountains, and I was watching the city council meeting as they were talking about budget, and specifically council person Peterson talked about refill, like water refill stations for, so are those going to be in the in this project, or are they just old fashioned water fountains? And if they're old fashioned, I would suggest we take a look at water refill.
I think we have our Public Works representative to answer that question for us.
Good evening, commissioners. That's a good question. And yes, that is a regular, not the old style, but the style that does have the ability to refill a water bottle.
Okay, I think that'll make the city council happy.
Anyone have any other questions?
I had one other question.
Sure.
Just on there, it says it's noted as a reflection pool. Is that, that's just going to be a feature, right? It was a reflection pool at one time, but it's going to be not a pool anymore. It's going to be an art project or something?
Yes, that's correct. The water fountain, the language is a little hard to follow. So there's a recirculating fountain right next to what was the reflecting pool. Historically, that did recycle the water from the pool to the fountain and back, but all the design and like previously we went through the analysis of doing that, and the decision was to just have that be a reflecting pool, and it's not going to have water. That's just the historic name for that feature, and it will become an art project.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, we will open up this to the public. If anyone would like to make any comments on the proposed Rispin Park project. Okay, seeing no one, we'll bring it back to the the commission, and have our deliberations. Is there someone who would like to start?
I think this is just a resurrection of what we've already approved.
Right.
So I don't think there should be any debate unless there's some new questions, because there's some new commissioners.
Well, I think
No.
I agree with you. I think it's a wonderful project. It's had lots of input from the community as well as various boards and commissions in the city. And I look forward to seeing it be built. So would somebody like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit, historical alteration permit, and coastal development permit?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a second. We probably should do a roll call vote on this one.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, the next item on our agenda is 207, 209, and 209A and 211 Esplanade. And this is a little different format than we sometimes use because this isn't an actual application. What they're asking for is guidance on an application that will be coming back to us at our next meeting. But since this is a property that was damaged during the recent storms we had at the beginning of the year, we're doing it this way to try and expedite the process as much as we can for the businesses down in the village so they can get up and running again. So I'm assuming we'll have a staff presentation on the information that was actually just given to us last Tuesday.
Yes, and I believe we have a recusal. So thank you.
Yes. Commissioner Christian has a conflict because she works for the architectural firm that's doing this design, so she needs to recuse herself.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, as I've seen more people come into the room, we're going to start the 4401 right at 7 p.m. And I just want to make sure the audience is aware of that. So tonight before you, thank you, Chair Westman, and good evening, commissioners. We have a guidance request for a future coastal development permit, minor design permit, and historic alteration permit for the facade modifications at 207 through 211 Esplanade. This is actually one structure. There's 4 different tenants within the structure. And to begin this process, I'm going to go through some historic photos with you. So in our in one of our documents in which we write up descriptions of the architecture throughout the city of Capitola, this description is provided for the properties along Esplanade. In 231 Esplanade, I'm sorry, this is for all of Esplanade. It's an eclectic Capitola Esplanade. The Esplanade has evolved since the 1920s to its present configuration. This restaurant row is in a continual state of remodeling from changing ownerships and periodic storm damage. The bandstand is the oldest continuing operation, and that's the only real write-up on those restaurant buildings along the Esplanade. This structure is listed in the 2005 historic structures list, which means it's potentially historic. And I think it's noted that it needs to be restudied within that 2005 list. Here we have a picture that predates 1980. I'm not exactly what date it is. I'm guessing in the 50s. And it's after a storm. But I wanted to point out some of the features that we still see today here is the canopy with supports. There are angled supports under the canopy, and then also the parapet wall. The windows that you're seeing along this facade have changed pretty dramatically since this picture was taken. This is a 1980s picture that was taken. I think it was 1986. And here you can see, again, a larger change. Actually, I'm going to go back. In this picture, you notice that it's one owner, it's one building, the building's connected in terms of utilizing the same materials throughout. And by the 80s, that has changed. It's still one building, same with one owner, but the facades have changed in which they've created kind of a falls differentiation between the buildings by utilizing exterior material improvements. Some features, though, that have carried throughout, that continued, is that there's still a canopy with supports, and the supports seem to be the original supports. And there's still that parapet wall. It looks like the river's end. They brought the signage out at the end of the canopy, but you can still see the parapet wall behind it. And here we are today. So the canopy with supports is no longer over Mai Tai Beach. But that feature does continue over Bay Bar, Pizza My Heart, and the Sandbar. And then the parapet wall you're also seeing through today. So that's kind of the last 70 years. Prior, in the 1920s, there was a completely different structure here. It was mostly a glass building, and that was taken out in the 20s. So the applicant, as Chair Westman provided the update during the storm, there's been extensive damage to these buildings. Much of the stucco has been impacted. The tiles at Pizza My Heart have been impacted. So as they've been working through the interior, they're now at the point of making decisions on the exterior, and wanted to bring a new concept in front of the Planning Commission to see if this could be considered. Modifications to the front of a structure typically require, because it's the coastal zone, a coastal development permit. Modifications to commercial require, if it isn't an addition, just facade changes require a minor design permit, which usually could be approved by staff. This we would tie in with the coastal development permit and have it approved by the Planning Commission, especially due to the location. And also because it's required to be reviewed by the Planning Commission because it's on that 2005 list. So for a historic alteration permit. So you're seeing the before and after, and I'm going to I've got some close-up images of this. So this is just from a distance. So here you're seeing what exists today on the Esplanade and what the applicant is proposing. I'm going to try to break this down into the 4 units so you can see the relationship between what is there now and what they're proposing. So in this first area, this is Mai Tai Beach. The changes they're proposing here, the awning would be changed to a trestle. You can see up in the far right corner, this E, it would be a wooden trestle. My understanding, and the architect is here for question and answers, is that the intent was not for the trellis to be open. It would be a closed feature with solid wood, and but they can clarify that. So it would be updated, the awning, and then also they were proposing the supports from the trellis to be modified to have more of a square or a rectangular look of the posts coming through the building. And then new materials, but the windows are the same for the Mai Tai Beach, same location, just updated. And the other significant change is the entryway, and the entryway feature would go up into the parapet roof, and the materials in that area would be Western red cedar. The next unit, which is the Bay Bar, the modifications here, the door is in the same location. The windows that are currently at Bay Bar are 2 double hung windows that are side by side. The proposal here is a larger window, which is preferred in commercial locations, so that as pedestrians walking by, they can be engaged and can look into the building. So, and then again, the same modifications to the trellis and supports. Next is Pizza My Heart. This would have the next 2 would have the most significant changes. So at Pizza My Heart, there's now a wider opening on the left-hand side. The window, so this would shift to the left a bit in order to allow a trash storage area actually to the right, which would be combined, I think, shared with the sandbar. And it would also allow patrons of Pizza My Heart to go in the left door and come out a new door to the right. So this is in terms of structural changes, this would be the largest structural change that's proposed, is an entryway on the left, and then they would come out on the right-hand side. You can see the door, the new exit door on the right, and that's inset there. So, and next is the sandbar. So for the sandbar, currently where you see C, it's a steel Corten, a sealed Corten steel to the left. I think it's an architectural feature, art feature, replacing the door that is currently there. Right now, there's 2 sets of doors. They'd like to enclose that in order to have, I believe that would be some, we'll actually have to ask the architect. There was a reason for that. I think it might be for trash enclosure, as well as it's an area that they utilize as where when a band comes into play, they stand there. So they'd rather close off that door and just have the one entry. The windows are the same windows that are there today, just they'd be replaced, but in the same location and size. And then the doorway, it doesn't extend in the parapet wall, but it has the new Western cedar finish. And again, they're continuing to have the features of a parapet wall throughout. They would like to make the parapet wall, I think it's 18 inches higher than what exists today, in order to screen some of the mechanical work on top of this building. You can definitely see all the mechanical features, and they thought this would help shield it more. And so those are the 4 changes. And here's the back side of the building. Currently, the back is not as differentiated into 4 structures. It looks like almost 2. And here they're proposing just to clean it up with stucco and wood finishes. And then again, increase the height of the parapet wall so that some of these, the mechanical features are shielded. and also adding to the piers, the pilings along the back, a horizontal wood. So I have some close-ups of that. One item I did want to bring, within our new code, we have, in the mixed-use village, we have design standards. The one standard that, in going through them, that I think is applicable to this project, and I just want to make the Planning Commission aware of this, because of moving forward, you'd have to make the finding that it substantially complies with this. It is it's a design guidance that storefront widths, the maximum building storefront width shall be 25 feet. And it's saying to look at this figure that's shown on the slide. Larger buildings shall be broken down into pedestrian scale rhythm with differentiated storefront design every 25 feet. It's really guidance. I think if it looks like the sandbar, if that's 35 feet wide, we wouldn't want to change that and say, oh, you've got to make the sandbar smaller down to 25 feet, but really guidance about the rhythm of the street and the pedestrian experience. So in terms of process, if the Planning Commission, after reviewing this, feels that this is a minor change to the building, this would come back to you as a Planning Commission review of a coastal development permit and a minor design permit, and also just the findings for a historic alteration permit, that it's minor changes. If this is a major change, we should probably go through the historic determination process for this structure and see whether or not it should be taken off the list. And then based on the outcome of that historic determination, whether or not it would need a review for the Secretary of Interior standards. So today we're looking for guidance on the concept, and then also some guidance on whether or not this should go out for third-party review. Regardless, with the design permit, we will need to engage a third-party review because it's a modification to commercial, and our new code requires any commercial facade changes be reviewed by a third party. So in the past, we've had RRM come in and review these projects. So I have close-ups on each of the existing. So if there's any discussion you want to have and looking at pictures, I've got plenty of pictures. Here again is the proposed before and after. And our recommendation is to provide guidance on this conceptual review tonight. And I do know Dan Gomez is in the room, and with Fuse Architecture, and Chuck Hammers, the owner of the property. So
Okay. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions of staff at this time?
I do have some questions just on the presentation. The picture shows on the water side, the new railing, if you will. Is that covering the pilings or replacing the pilings?
covering.
That's good. And then also the sidewalk, they're not encroaching into the existing sidewalk?
My understanding, and this is a conceptual, so I haven't seen site plan, but that there's no new encroachments into the sidewalk.
Thank you.
I had one minor question. So I think at the end, I think it's the sandbar, they have an outdoor seating area there. Is that going to continue on the back of the building?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. Okay, anyone have anything else?
On the the piers, are we reinforcing them for future storms, or what are we doing there?
I'm going to ask the applicant to come up.
Okay. Yeah, why don't we ask the applicant and the architect perhaps to come up and give them a chance to.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. I'm Dan Gomez with Fuse Architects. Fortunate to be a business owner and resident here for 22 years and love the village and glad to be a part of it. So I was really excited when Chuck actually reached out to us and asked us to be involved in helping him on such short notice to try to the opportunity to improve the building and the facade. So, and thanks to Katie for the staff, because she kind of really sent us some of this historical photos to kind of look at what are the things that we could tie to that are important, what kind of carries that kind of, how did it change throughout the years? And so just in looking at, like when you see that photo from, was it 1958? I think it was 1958. having that awning continue across with the corbels, that you see the curved corbels come in, and how that relates to, and it was removed unfortunately on Mai Tai Beach, and how that relates to kind of Zelda's. And Zelda's has theirs kind of go continue to the ground as a colonnade. So seeing that really kind of was kind of a sticking point for us. And even though the drawings, it happened very quickly, but I think that element in and of itself is kind of something we really want to tie to. So as Katie clarified, we do want to have that as be a solid awning. So really we're going to kind of straighten out that awning, and we actually want to continue the corbels. I know it kind of showed the squared off kind of rafter tails coming out. We actually don't want to do that. So when you're considering your guidance, that we actually want to kind of continue that curved aspect on the corbels, but potentially change them out because they're failing. It kind of has, if you look at the facade now and that trim, it actually kind of dips and waves. So it leaks all the time. So we're hoping to reconstruct that in the manner that kind of restores the historical past of what that was meant to do. And one of the things that I love about just in this kind of esplanade has been improved. And if you start at like Stockton Bridge and you walk down past Margaritaville and into Paradise, that kind of unification and this, like she was talking about the street presence, the street vibe, and what does that experience feel like? You kind of lose that once you get past Paradise Beach Grill. And so they're a little more haphazard. They've changed so much over the years. But if you look back at like that 1958 photo, it was very much more unified. And I think where our hope and our goal is to kind of restore some of that. We wanted to kind of tie in with the materials, like so the stucco is that modeled, and you can kind of see it really well on Paradise and Margaritaville, where they've used the Interworld color stucco that has the mottled appearance, has a really smooth coat to it. We want to do something very similar, but in like of a warmer white color is what we're kind of hoping to give it some differentiation between the buildings, but still complement them. One of the things about the entrances is like we wanted to kind of define those entrances because we are kind of unifying the building and giving it more of a street presence character. So by not necessarily, we're not changing the entrances more than we are kind of accentuating them. We do want to propose potentially on Sandbar and on Bay Bar to kind of gradually taper that entrance back to kind of guide you into the doors. But the entrances are so small on Paradise. I mean, I would take me back, sorry, on Mai Tai Beach and on Pleasure or Pizza My Heart, that the entrances are so narrow that we just plan to kind of accentuate them. And that's why we kind of rose up the entrance a little bit. And one of the things that has never kind of worked well with Pizza My Heart is that entryway has always been kind of like just a traffic jam of people trying to get in, trying to get out. And their experience there is really hampered by the fact that there's no access through that building. So in talking with Chuck, one of the things that would really be nice is to be able to shift that over a little bit so you can kind of have an in and out kind of entranceway, which would really free up a lot of congestion at that spot. And as you know, it's a very popular restaurant, so that tends to fill up pretty quick, and it kind of it really impacts the traffic as people are walking through the Esplanade. So our hope is that by the kind of unifying the look, cleaning it up, hold on to some of those historic aspects, which I think is really that awning with those corbels. That's really the unifying element that seems to kind of really create that street presence. And then clean up each of the restaurant entrances. I think we're excited about moving that forward. And on the back, if you look at the back side, we're kind of keeping all the windows. The windows are the same. They're existing windows. We're just trying to create like some kind of unification of the, and even now the whole backside is all one material, all one color. We want to put an awning over the Sandbar outdoor seating area to kind of continue that trellis that you kind of see over at Paradise and Margaritaville, kind of keep that theme kind of going for the outdoor seating. So that would be a nice way to provide some kind of screen and shade and unify the look. So in the breezeway, you'll see that there's kind of those depressions where there's a current mural. We'd like to propose doing something there artistic, like an artistic tile or something that kind of creates some kind of presence in there that complements the colors that we're proposing on the facade side. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any particular questions you'd like to ask the architect before we open the public hearing?
I do, because it was mentioned that you're raising the parapet a wall and with the idea of obstructing the, ducting or whatever that's there. So the question I'm wondering about the sight line. So, I mean, you're obstructing it from whom? There's all kinds of sight lines from all over the village, right?
Correct.
Different heights, second story, third story. And so I would hate to think that your intention to make it more pleasant looking actually is counterproductive because it blocks somebody's view line of the beach. Did you consider that or talk
Oh, yeah.
to people about that?
So this angle is right across the street and on the sidewalk side over by the hotel. So if you look kind of across, really what we were kind of determining when we did that was that how do we block the mechanical equipment? And it's just an assumption right now that 18 inches is the exact number because we haven't exactly dimensioned that portion of it. But there is a pitched roof beyond this. So the pitched roof, if you're any elevation higher than that, it's way taller than any part of the street facade. So
Okay.
there's no it's really from a street, a walking pedestrian's perspective that you would block any kind of mechanical equipment.
Thank you.
Okay,
Anyone else?
back to my question about the pier. Is there, what are we doing?
Oh, yeah.
Reinforcing that or?
So I know that there's some damage to some of the piers that are going to be replaced, or the pilings. So I would assume that those pilings are going to occur in the same location potentially, probably most likely. But if you look at underneath the underneath side of Paradise, they did the horizontal board members and it relatively kind of helped, I think, with the storm damage because it blocked a lot of the debris from coming in. And if you look at what happened to Chuck's buildings, the water surged, debris surged underneath there and actually pushed up the floor out near the front side of the street.
Right.
So our hope is that one, it helps to clean up the mismatched look of the pilings, but also helps provide some protection from storm surge.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Pizza My Heart, the window, is that dimension going to be the same? So the entry is basically the same width?
I mean,
Try to-
ideally, yes. I mean, I know there's some code clearance and maneuverability issues that we'll have
Right.
to figure out. So, but in general terms, I would say that that's our goal is to kind of keep it the same dimension. Yeah.
Okay. Well, your design at least will improve the flow of people, in and out. It's better than it is today. That's good.
Yeah, it seems like it'll help.
Okay, thank you. So is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this design?
I guess I didn't.
You don't have to.
Okay,
You can
good.
just give us your name and we'll record it.
Matt Arthur, resident business owner. Love what you guys are doing, expediting stuff. My only 2 cents is I'm glad you guys highlighted in the yellow boxes the individual businesses because it was hard to figure out which ones were which. I know if you go back to the whole historical stuff,
Mhm.
if you look at the current state of what it is, you can really designate which business is which just by color.
Mhm.
I think with this, it's fantastic. It's bringing it up to more of a modern aspect, but we're losing some of that charm that we've had with some of the buildings. So my only 2 cents would be if there's color that can be involved, rather than it look like one continuous building. But I think that's it, but I think it's great.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing no one, we will bring it back to the
I think
commission.
there's somebody.
Oh, sorry.
The only thing that I was concerned about is the storage on the street. Hopefully it won't be garbage bins, which will impact the aroma as you walk down the area there. There are garbage bin storage bins that are close to the street in some of those places now.
Mhm.
So hopefully it won't be garbage that's stored in the storage bins that are occurring in 2 places.
All right, thank you.
Do we have your name?
Yep, Steve Walsh.
Thank you.
All right. Someone want to start on this item?
Sure. I could agree with the comments that have been made. I think it's a nice improvement. Personally, I like to see a little more uniqueness to the 4 businesses, some more definition. I think if we go back and look and ask people to take pictures of Capitola, look at pictures of everybody taking, you look at the Esplanade, you look at the Venetians and you see color, and you look at downtown, you see color. So I would hope, I love the improvements. I think it's great. I appreciate you that you brought it forward and asking for some guidance before it just came as a project. And I just hope that maybe when we saw it next time, there could be a little bit more of a challenge of how we could define those spaces individually a little bit better.
Yeah, my comments are pretty much the same as the first citizen there. Is like maybe we could change the colors on the different different storefronts to differentiate them a little bit as opposed to one sort of monolithic color. But other than that, I think the design is really good.
It looks.
Yeah, I'm always reluctant to make aesthetic comments about what looks good and what doesn't look good. I think this is a good project. It's my comments would be keep in mind the pedestrian friendliness, which I think you have. We don't want to have like projections that people could bump into. We want to make sure that this sidewalk is again easily accessed and there's plenty of throughput. Looks like you addressed that in at least a little bit in Pizza My Heart. It's again humans. I maybe worry about takeout windows again, because I know historically there's been some issues there. If you ever wanted to do a takeout window, then you get a line of people, and then again it's a pedestrian walkway issue. So I don't see any takeout windows there. So that would be something to definitely keep in mind if you were planning on having that kind of thing. There might be some objections there. Other than that, I have no further comments.
Okay. So from me, there's good news and bad news. I like the back of the building a lot, and I think it's great to see that you're actually going to reinforce the pilings and hopefully prevent some of the damage from future storms that you suffered at this time. So, and I'm happy to see the awning going over the seating area there at the sandbar. So that part I really like. The front of the building, I appreciate the thought that you've put into this, and I think there are definitely some improvements, as Commissioner Wilkes said, how you're dealing with Pizza My Heart. But for me, I don't like the signs all being the same on top of the awnings or the parapet there that's been proposed. It looks a little like, I can't come up with a better term, and I know this is not the best term to use. It looks a little like a strip mall to me right now. And so I would be much happier if there was a bit more identity to each one of the businesses, so it was on a more human, small scale feel, which the rest of the village seems to be like. We have several buildings down there, including Margaritaville, that has several businesses in that building. And if you look at it, there's different colors, there's different elevations. It works. On Capitol Avenue, there's several buildings that have 2 or 3 businesses in them, and they're broken up so they seem more like individual businesses. I think we need to talk a little bit about the historical designation, because that's quite a long, sort of cumbersome process in most cases. And for me, if a design came back and it fit more into what I call the character of the village, addresses the comments that people here have made, then I would be thinking more that these are minor changes to the structure and could go along making that determination so that you wouldn't have to go through the whole historical review process. So those are my comments. Anybody have anything else they want to add? Since we're not voting, I think we're just making comments.
So, because they're trying to continue moving forward and would like some really clear guidance, I just want to kind of
Sure.
repeat back what I heard. I heard maybe increase the differentiation in the identity between the buildings. Consider the signs of, I heard that from one commissioner. Did anyone else have concerns with signage repeating itself, or would you like to see those differentiated as well?
I think that myself, I would think that would go with in the uniqueness, of the sign being different or some way of identifying each business different.
Okay, and then just that rhythm of keeping the character.
Mhm.
So that will provide the applicant with clear direction, I believe. If they've any other questions, if you don't mind if we do this a little bit differently than normal, where they're working
No, it's
against, and
fine.
we've got 10 minutes until
Yeah.
the next application. So if you have any further questions that you'd like addressed by the Planning Commission, this would be the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments and feedback.
Yeah.
Helpful. We considered many of the things that you've already talked about and what your concerns are. And that's why we kind of looked at many historical photos to kind of truly see what was this building throughout its years, from the 20s to the 60s through the 50s, 80s, and how it changed so dramatically over time. And one of the most longstanding and the one things that kind of resonated with us is that it actually did not have a differentiation of material for that whole building for many, many years, for 20,
Yeah.
30 years. And I understand what you're talking about. So we did talk about adding some features to kind of like at the end of My Type Beach, currently there's like red brick that just kind of wraps that one corner. But you see a similar element on Paradise where they stuccoed kind of like a projected kind of base around the corner. So we considered, this was just talks because we've been talking about this for the last week, that how could we differentiate them without totally differentiating them? Because what you end up having is if you look at the frontage of Paradise and Margaritaville, even though they do have differentiation in elevation, we don't have that opportunity here because it is one building, whereas those are really one building, two buildings, three buildings. So I appreciate that. And then from an architecture standpoint, I'm glad they did what they did because they had the architectural opportunities to take different forms and move them back. In this case, since we can't go that route, it's one building. We like to call it in architecture facadism, where you're plastering on a look onto, and it's not true to the architecture of what it should be. So I can do things with material changes and give each one a distinct look, but how do you still unify it? And so I would like direction on the fact that if we still kept something to unified as a building, but give distinct look to each building, because I understand what you're talking about, whether maybe like, for example, let's say Sandbar kind of maintain this look. And then we shift to Pizza My Heart, where we're kind of proposing, let's say, a tile at that whole kind of entrance and exit area. And then maybe a material continued up to the parapet, maybe the wood material continued up to the parapet. So now you have two defined looks there. And then maybe the end portion being My Type Beach and Bay Bar now can continue that. We tie that base in that ties it back to Paradise that wraps the corner. But predominantly, like the mix matching of colors, I understand.
Yeah, okay. So I think I'm actually going to
Yeah.
interrupt you a little
Sure.
bit. It is really hard for us to sit up here without seeing any kind of plans or drawings.
Sure, understood.
To,
Yeah.
make concrete decisions about what we think, say yes to this doorway or this window or that. I think there are some unifying features on the building that have been there historically. One of them is sort of along the parapet wall is one, and I personally don't have any difficulty with it going up higher. The sort of awning roof line that goes along the front, that's sort of a unifying feature for the building. There are definitely some there. But I think for what I've heard us say, or down this end of
Down
the
there,
table say, is that we feel it's important for the size and scale of the buildings for the individual businesses to be differentiated. And I think staff has a pretty good idea after working with us for quite a while about what we're trying to say. So, my suggestion is really to work with them and hopefully when you bring a project back, it's going to be one that works for us and one that we feel isn't a significant enough change to be a major historical modification.
Okay, would you say that that would apply to the backside as well? Or
As
would it
I
be-
mentioned, for
or do we
me, I
look at it
thought
as
the
one building?
backside of the
Yeah.
building looked fine. I think it pretty much, it's very similar to what's there right now. And it is a unified structure on the back for the most part today. So I don't know if anyone else has any issues, but for me, the back of the building was fine. What I was concerned about was the part that faced onto the Esplanade. And anyone can,
Could
Yeah,
you,
no,
could you bring up the picture for the?
I was going to say the same thing. The backside, I think, is fine the way you've done it. It's pretty similar to today.
yes,
Probably pretty similar to how it was a long time ago.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
you're
That's what we're
welcome.
looking for. Feedback. Thanks.
Okay, it is now about 5 minutes to 7, and we have advertised the next item on our agenda will start at 7 o'clock. So we'll take a few minute recess and reconvene at 7 o'clock to hear the project on Capitola Road. Sure, yeah. Needed to call it a strip mall, but it just,
No, it's a good description.
yeah.
It's okay,
Exactly.
Just domestic.
So good evening, everyone. We're going to re-adjourn our meeting. The next application on our agenda is the one at, oh, we forgot about 520 Capitola Avenue, Riverview Drive. And so we need to have a motion to continue that application to the April Planning Commission meeting. Somebody like to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we continue 520 Riverview Drive to April 20th or whenever the April meeting is.
All right, and all of those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, now we're at 4401 Capitola Road. This is for a design permit, conditional use permit, density bonus, and coastal development permit request for a 36-unit, 100% affordable housing project. And before we begin our discussions on this particular item tonight, since we have for the first time a fairly large group of people here, I have a couple of announcements I would like to make to hopefully make this all go smoothly for all of us. As with the other public hearing items, at the beginning, we'll have a staff presentation and planning commissioners will have the opportunity to ask staff clarifying questions. When the public comment period opens, we're going to first hear from the applicant, and we're going to give the applicant 6 minutes to make their presentation. Again, the Planning Commission probably will be asking the applicant some clarifying questions. Once the applicant has finished their presentation, we will hear from anyone who wants to make a comment or a statement about this project. Each person will be given 3 minutes for your comments, and we will be enforcing the 3-minute rule so we can get through this item tonight. If there's someone there who, someone else has made a comment that was identical to what you wanted to say, it's perfectly okay to simply say that you agree with the prior speaker or some individual, and that won't in any way deter, diminish your comments to us. You're welcome to give your name and where you live if you would like that information included in our minutes. We're asking that there be no applause or booing. We understand there's strong opinions on both sides of this application, but we're hoping that we can all be respectful to each other. When everyone has had their turn to speak, at the end of that, we'll give the applicant 3 minutes to provide any additional information that they want to provide to the Planning Commission after hearing the public comments. One thing that is very different about this application process, since it is an affordable housing application, is that under state law, we only get to have 5 public hearings in the city on this application. And the Planning Commission, and that includes hearings at the City Council, and the Planning Commission's on its 3rd public hearing right now. So if we want to preserve the opportunity for this item to be appealed to the City Council, and I think most of you know in Capitola, most applications of any significant ultimately do get appealed to the City Council by someone, then as a commission, we're going to need to make a decision tonight so we can keep the opportunity for appeal to still be open to the public or the applicant. Lastly, I would like to take a moment to personally thank our staff. They have been very kind and professional to me, asking numerous questions and being sort of upset about how this whole process is working. And I would like to thank them, particularly Brian, for how professionally they answered all of my questions and all of the information that they made available to me through this process. So if there are no questions from the
Well,
commissioners
yeah,
about how it's going to work tonight, go
I
ahead.
don't understand the public, or the 5 comment rule, because the 19th was just a continuation. Why does that count? We didn't talk about it. We just said we had a Zoom problem or an internet problem, so we continued it.
Right.
It was on the agenda, and the item was on the agenda and we did just continue it, but I think under state law, because it was on the agenda, we took action. I would leave this to the attorneys to figure out if it comes down to asking for another hearing. But that's my understanding, and we're going to err on the side of
Okay.
caution. So-
Okay, that makes
Right,
sense.
and I think we did get a letter addressed to the planning commission from the attorneys explaining their determination that that had been a meeting under state law.
Yeah, they said they counted it as
Yeah.
part of the 5. So, okay, fine.
Okay, any other questions about the process? Okay, so with that, we'll let the staff begin.
Thank you. I just wanted to let the public know that we also have the community room open, and we have a TV in the community room if you feel more comfortable in a space with more room. So right across the hall is the community room. This will be live streaming, and then you would still have the opportunity to come in and make public comment. And from there, I'll hand it over to Brian. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for those introductions, and good evening, Chair Westman and commissioners. I've got a slideshow here. This really kind of builds on from the last slideshow, but I do have all the slides that we showed at the January 25th meeting, if discussion warrants, so I can reference those. But again, the entitlements requested for this project are a design permit, conditional use permit, coastal development permit, and a state density bonus. The property collectively is two parcels and 0.81 acres in the mixed use neighborhood zone. Again, repeating the background is that we have had 2 hearings, but the most recent was January 25th. The commission gave some specific direction for reasons why to continue the project. One was to further study traffic safety with specific focus at a new driveway that was introduced at 45th Avenue and Capitola Road, and to verify that noticing was done correctly and is potentially expanded going forward. So I'll address those items in the next few slides, but what I wanted to do first, just to kind of tee up the discussion, is just talk about the overall project, just so we all have a base of what's being proposed. So the overall project scope is to demo the existing 4 two-story commercial buildings, demo all the parking and paving, and regrade the site. The proposal includes 2 3-story multifamily buildings. A single-story support building is also part of that. There's 36 units. The proposal is 100% affordable for the rental units. And there's an introduction of 2 parking lots, one accessing 44th and the other one accessing the intersection noted at 45th and Capitola Road. Some photos just again for context. The top left, we are at the intersection of 45th and Capitola Road, and then the middle right, we are at the other corner, 45th and Capitola Road, and then swinging around at the bottom on 44th Avenue. And this is, for zoning purposes, this is the front property, the narrowest frontage. Looking at the site plan, I'll use the pointer a bit here, just big picture. This is the ingress-egress vehicular driveway to 44th and a proposed parking lot with 16 stalls. Coming over to the other side, this is an ingress-egress driveway. This is at that intersection of Capitola Road and 45th Avenue. This parking lot is showing 21 stalls. And then the 2 buildings are colored in orange. The one addressing Capitola Road. To the left in the plan here is Building A. And the one that's perpendicular and a little bit smaller off of Capitola Road is Building B, as noted in the plans. And then the gray, red, and blue is the support building. And so this is community spaces, long-term bike storage, and the management and facilities office for the property. And then this is the rendering. So giving you a three-dimensional look of colors, mature landscaping. Roof lines is a combination of a 6 and 12 roof, gable end, and a slope back 4 and 12 to which is effectively a parapet. And then the single story support building, community room, et cetera, has a monoplane roof. And then this is from the north parking lot that accesses 44th Avenue, looking at the center courtyard, tot lot, and the stairways and balconies on the north facade. So that was kind of just the background. So now I'm going to get into the items that's essentially the new information for you this evening. So looking at the noticing, the map on the left, this is the code minimum requirement, 300-foot map. This is what we did for the January hearings. We sent out a 300-foot list, which included 156 mail recipients. We did a single site posting and we posted in the newspaper. After looking at our code and following up with what made sense and the desire to have an expanded noticing list, we created a custom map, and the red ring there is still 300 feet, but we expanded it so that all the highlighted in blue properties were sent a mailer. We really tried to go all the way up to Grace Street on the north side and span from 43rd Avenue to 47th. And then south of Capitola Road, we included Emerald Street, Crystal Street, and Diamond Street, all areas that would likely get overflow parking. And this totaled out to 451 recipients. We added additional site postings till we captured the full length of the frontage. And we also did the newspaper posting for this hearing. This is just a rundown of the rest of the slides that I'll get to. So the city initially commissioned a traffic study done by Dudek. And Dudek has prepared an addendum that focused on the traffic safety as directed by the commission. The applicant on their own independently hired a transportation consultant to do a peer review of Dudek's initial report and provide any additional information regarding traffic. They hired Hexagon Transportation out of San Jose. And you've also got a number of public comments. I believe we were up to 56 at close of business today, and those are all additional materials at the dais there and at the back table for the public. The applicant also submitted and was included in the packet a property management plan, a parking plan, and a tenant screening plan. And then there was some extended discussion about rooftop equipment and the roof line. And so the applicant has also provided a line of sight diagram that I'll show. So getting into the two traffic studies. So with Dudek's addendum, they really concluded with 4 findings. The top one is essentially that there's just not a lot of traffic being introduced here. So it's just a low level of volume that's being introduced. It's 7 or 8 trips in the AM peak and 8 or 9 in the PM peak hour. Inherently, it's an all-way stop, so it controls simultaneous movements and legally requires drivers to actually make a full stop before proceeding. They reviewed site distance and have reported back that it's adequate. And then they also reported from through insurance data, collision reportings at this intersection, which is a 3-way intersection now. They pulled 5 years of data, 2016 through 2021, throwing out 2020 as the COVID year. And they found 2 incidents where a vehicle was at fault with a pedestrian. So they found 2 incidents, which is can be characterized as relatively low. Hexagon, they did a peer review of Dudek's original report. So they just concurred with the preliminary findings. level of service, trip generation, et cetera. The one bit of information that they did provide that was new is these travel paths. And so I included these in your packet. I'll call attention to the blue traffic line. So the modeling here is done on a Chevy Suburban. And so they're basically demonstrating that each individual movement, either coming from the west or turning to the west on Capitola Road, can be done independently at the four-way stop. And the same heading east, and then the same heading south. Won't spend too much time on the management plans, but this was just further information for the public and for the Planning Commission. It did prompt a bit of discussion when it came to the parking management plan, just because of the volume of comments that we've received. And so we have talked to the applicant about potentially trying to expand the ability to have overflow parking or get into some kind of a reciprocal agreement with a nearby business. The only problem with them fully committing to that as a condition of approval is that they're committing to the affordable housing in a 55-year contract. So this would have to be outside of the city's approval. So we can't really condition this, but these are suggestions that we've made to them. And we've also suggested that they consider a car share on site. So I want to talk a little bit about the density bonus. This is really kind of at the heart of the discussion this evening. And so I just want to kind of recall attention. This is not a typical project or process, and state law really preempts our local standards. We don't have all the same tools at our disposal. And density bonus law does go all the way back to 1979, but particularly in the last 5 years, the state has really made some modifications that give the developer a lot more leverage in proposing these type of projects and reduce local control. The cities basically have a pretty high bar in order to push back on proposed concessions and waivers. There's a pretty narrow definition of what can be pushed back on or challenged, and it would have to be something very specific and be causing an adverse, unavoidable impact to public health and safety. This project specifically is 100% affordable, so it does qualify for 4 concessions and unlimited waivers. In the government code, the definition of concession and waiver are a bit circular. They both can apply to development standards. A concession is a little bit more of a powerful tool, though, and it can actually involve like a modification to a zoning ordinance. So we would usually be looking at these with a market rate project as variances or zoning code amendments. But because of the density bonus law, we have to take these at face value as being necessary in order to facilitate the construction of affordable housing. And my last bullet here really is, this is kind of at the core of what the state's goal is the exchange here is to get a developer to not only commit to building these units, but facilitating them and renting them to low-income tenants for 55 years in exchange to bypass local standards and facilitate their construction. So just into the specifics. So what does it mean for this project? There's 4 concessions that are being requested. The top 2, the daylight plane and the side setback, are both very much related. This is at the north facade of Building B. The proposal is to have this 5 feet away from a property line where 11 feet would be the typical standard. And then the daylight plane also relates to the setback. So the building, that section of Building B would be partially encroaching into what would be required as the daylight plane. The parking ratio for multifamily is 2.5 units or parking spaces per unit. Proposal is including 1 per unit. And then also the mix of parking, so compact spaces, the code limit is 30% and 42% is being proposed. Waivers, this ties a little bit more to measurable development standards and is supposed to be reducing the overall cost of the project. So they're proposing 36 feet where 27 is the standard. They have not specified tree replacement size, but have done calculations that if the trees reach maturity, that the canopy would comply with the city standard. And then the entry design, we have objective standards for multifamily housing market rate where the entrances are supposed to address the street for reasons of not wanting to install an elevator to save cost and for installation of storm drainage retention. The applicant is asking for a waiver from that standard, as well as massing breaks every 8 foot, 8 foot at every 50 feet is also an objective standard. And the applicant is asking for a waiver from that because these units essentially stack and the efficiencies are clustering the plumbing and the mechanical. And so introducing jogs in buildings is less efficient from a cost standpoint. This slide is really just a clarification. So as noted, we've had a lot of inquiries and questions about the project. So one of them has to do with AB 2097, which is another action the state has taken to reduce parking. And it ties into high quality transit as defined by the state. And I just want to be clear that AB 2097 is not applicable to this project. A high quality transit by the state's definition is really a rapid service, something that's turning over and doing pickups and drop-offs every 15 minutes during a peak hour. And really nothing like that in Capitola exists on any of the bus routes. So really we fall back to the density bonus and the concession, and I've cited the government code section here for you that is applicable to the parking reduction being requested. So as noted, this slide's dated by 2 comments. So we had 56 at close of business. Parking, certainly the #1 comment that we've received. And I've covered how we analyzed that with the density bonus. The intersection safety, covered that as well with the 2 studies. And high density has definitely been a comment in stride with mass scale and the building being out of character with the surroundings. Later in the process, I'd say in the last 3 or 4 days, I've received a few more support letters, but just as a ratio, by far the letters in opposition or critical of the project far outweigh the support letters. This is the diagram that I mentioned about line of sight. So this is pedestrian view looking over rooftops. So they've nestled the mechanical equipment down, showing views from offsite private property, as well as at the north side of Capitola Road's sidewalk. I think there was some discussion at the last meeting about solar panels being mounted in this area as well. And I believe the applicant will be able to address that further if that question comes up. We do have a few conditions we wanted to propose this evening. Really nothing major, but just because of the intersection, we want to make sure that we clear the line of sight. Let's see. No, the first one is, this one was actually from last time. There's a landscape strip that it was a layer that wasn't turned on the drafting. So the applicant has agreed to add landscaping to the north side of the parking lot. The next one is the site distance. So this is referring back to a code section. So we just don't want to plant any trees when we're introducing a new curb cut that would impede vehicle view of oncoming pedestrians or bikes or traffic. And 52 is a reporting condition. So we're asking for annual reporting. This kind of a project requires a lot of reporting to state agencies and lenders and those who help fund projects like this. So we're asking that the developer also include us, the community development director, in their annual reporting so that we can verify their compliance with their agreement to maintain these units as affordable. And then the last one is has a bit to do with tenant screening. And so this would give priority to employees or potential employees that are within a certain area relative to the subject property. So with that, we are recommending approval. We have drafted a resolution, so we're asking the Planning Commission to adopt the resolution in attachment 8 and approve the design permit, conditional use permit, coastal development permit, and density bonus request. And before I conclude, I just wanted to introduce those that are available to answer questions. So certainly planning staff is available for questions. Layla from the city's legal team is on Zoom. The Dudek transportation engineer, Dennis, is also available for questions. And then the applicant's owner's rep is here and their legal counsel is in attendance, and I believe their architect is on Zoom. So that is my conclusion, and I'm happy to take any questions of the commission.
I've got
So-
a quick question.
Sure, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
Okay.
jump the gun here, but the tenant screening, that's a condition. So if we approve, take your recommendation and make a motion to approve it with your conditions, the tenant screening per the legal verbiage that was included in the packet is part of that recommended, part of that
Yes.
condition? Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Great. And I might add to that I was actually going to propose that the wording be changed a little on that item. And instead of saying that it's individuals who either work or accepted jobs in Capitola, that we change it to be work or accepted a job offer within 1.5 miles of the project. And I actually have a little diagram I can hand out to you, and I think staff may have a slide which shows what that area would encompass. And, you know, my reasoning for this is that I think if we have to live with the limited parking, that having people live there who work within 1.5 miles of the project, those are people who would be able to walk or ride a bike or get to work without the necessity of having a car. And so it might encourage a few less cars there. And 1.5 miles takes in New Brighton, it takes in Soquel Elementary School, the school up on Opal Cliffs, and the village, and almost all the area along 41st Avenue. So there certainly are enough people working in there that I think we could find people who would fit that criteria.
I'd like to see your things.
And does anyone else have any questions of staff at this time, or?
Just out of curiosity, has the city ever conducted a parking survey? Parking study of any kind in its history?
The city. I'm not aware of any studies that were done in this specific neighborhood. But yes, we've conducted parking surveys throughout the village.
Yeah, but it's limited to basically the
Limited,
village.
Yeah, not citywide.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So I have some questions that I'd like to go through, but maybe if the applicant went first, then maybe some of my questions might be answered, or.
Yeah, or you can ask your questions after we have the public hearing and we do our deliberations. We'll give you an opportunity to ask those questions then. And I just have one more question about the staff presentation. I guess one of the areas that I'm having difficulty with is that, you know, we're being told that Senate Bill 2097 doesn't apply because because we don't have any kind of rapid, high quality rapid transit, I believe is what they refer to it as. And so, you know, when I read that, I thought, well, you know, this is great because they would, since we don't have that, they would have to meet the minimum parking standards that bill requires you to have, which would be about 54 spaces, which, to me, I sort of went, well, that's significantly less than what we would require. That's sort of, a good compromise for the community and to allow the project to go develop. So is there something, there's something further on in that legislation that makes this not apply to this project?
Yeah, so AB 2097 does not apply. The applicant is specifically putting forward a concession request for the reduction in parking, which government codes section, I did cite it here, 65915 subsection K, number 1, allows them to use a concession to reduce vehicular parking.
Okay, yeah. I just needed to hear it one more time, I guess, for it to really sink into my brain. Okay, thank you.
But section P actually incorporates the AB 2097 rule. So they're not using that, they're using the other section.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Okay, at this point, we'll open our public hearing and give the applicant an opportunity, 6 minutes to make their presentation.
All right, good evening. Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners, thank you for having us back. I'm Garrett Bascom, Project Manager. This is Russell Morris on Zoom. Like Brian mentioned, is our architect. In affordable housing, the sites we select are very important. Our site is situated within walking distance of dozens of different restaurants, hotels, pharmacies, shopping centers, parks, and to the public library. We've discussed this before, just wanted to reiterate it. This is significant because these local shops provide the opportunity for our residents to work within walking and biking distance to where they have potentially homes, right? In addition, our site has several bus stops directly adjacent from the site. Especially important because our residents actually use public transportation. The Governor's Office of Planning and Research conducted a technical advisory study published in 2018, stating that residents in affordable housing are more likely to search out and find housing closer to their work and closer to public transportation. This is because they often rely on walking, biking, and public transportation. And to be much more specific, it was in the staff report, but it didn't really get covered. 25 of our units have won county-based vouchers. And that includes all of the 2 and 3 bedrooms. So every single 2 and 3 bedroom in this project will be restricted to a 30% AMI, which means every single person that lives in that unit, their combined income cannot exceed 30% of the average median income of the county of Santa Cruz. So what does that mean? So for a 2-bedroom unit, the maximum income for the entire household is $42,000 a year. For a 3-bedroom unit, the maximum income for the entire household is $48,000 a year. And remember, those are the maximums. So generally, no, not generally, always it will be less than that, because if they hit it or exceed it, then they cannot live there. Often our properties are occupied by single-parent families with young children. And with those numbers in mind, purchasing and maintaining a vehicle is a substantial expense. Having multiple vehicles is a luxury, and sometimes they have no vehicle at all. And in the parking management plan, I won't get into details on it, but when a certain household doesn't have a vehicle, what we do is we reallocate those to other families within the development if that need is there. So, in conclusion, our proposed design, like it was mentioned, complies with the California state density bonus laws through the use of concessions and waivers. The research from the governor's office suggests that the project will work. But with that said, we want to be good neighbors, contrary to what a lot of people are going to say probably. But we really do. And we're going to be here for 55 years. And if it turns out that the project is operating at a parking deficiency, we want to rectify that. We want to work with the city to do that. But like it was mentioned, because we have so many commitments to the funding sources, which are very in depth, we can't have that as a condition because of the long-term leases, because we're locked in on a 55-year lease. So working with a car share program is a fantastic idea. Doing reciprocal parking agreements with neighbors like the Capitola Mall or the Calvary Chapel next door or the DMV, different places like that, we could definitely look into. I'm running over on time. I'm going to turn it over to Russell to.
Thank you all. Good evening, and thank you for having us here. My name is Russell Morse. I'm an attorney at Myers Nave. As you know by now, my firm represents the applicant, CRP, Affordable Housing and Community Development. And before I sort of get into it, I do want to, as everybody has already, thank staff for all their work. It was a lot that went into this project. I mean, the applicant went above and beyond and did studies. I have another binder yay thick of all the studies and reports that were required that we were happy to go to take care to make sure that everybody's questions were answered. I thank staff again for their explanation of the density bonus law. It was very thorough, and we agree with exactly what they said. I'm going to take a minute and 22 seconds to briefly talk about another state law, the Housing Accountability Act. As you probably received in my letter earlier this week, we had an extensive discussion on state law, Government Code Section 65589.5, the Housing Accountability Act. Similar to density bonus, the Housing Accountability Act was enacted to try to ensure the development of affordable housing in communities throughout California. And similar to the density bonus law, it takes away a lot of the discretion of local planning commissioners and city council people to oppose projects. Essentially, if a project complies with local objective development standards and is consistent with the zoning code and the general plan, then the planning commission, city council don't have the discretion to deny the project, except for very limited options related to, as was mentioned, a specific adverse impact on public health and safety. None of those findings were made here, and therefore there is no avenue to which to deny the project. I know it is not easy to make that decision, but that is what the California legislature has decided. And with that, we are happy to answer any other questions that you have of us.
Thank you very much.
I do have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I just want to know, do you have any objections to the conditions as imposed by staff for approval?
I can have Garrett speak as to some of the more development oriented ones, but with respect specifically to the housing preference, we think that's an admirable condition. I have some significant concerns about the legality of local preferences for housing. I would ask that you speak to your city attorney to get her preference. She represents the city, because what we don't want to do is run afoul of federal law, federal fair housing law, to create a discriminatory or disparate impact by creating a local preference.
Yeah. So any other objections to the consent? I'm not the consent item, but the conditions.
Not at all. The first one was really a drafting mistake, so I'm glad that's there. The second one I love. I think it's a great idea to not include the landscaping, to make sure there's no issues with site visibility. And I'm blanking on the last one, the reporting. Yeah, no issues with that.
There were other conditions that this is like condition number 50 something. No problems with the first 49.
They were pretty standard now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you at the end of the public hearing. So this is now the opportunity for all of you to present comments or statements to us about this particular project. As we mentioned, we're going to have a 3-minute limit on each speaker. It might be nice to make things run smoothly if a couple people sort of line up to speak as we go through the evening, just to have a smooth flow. And again, if you want to give us your name and where you live, you're welcome to do that. And we look forward to hearing from you. Okay, we will hear our Zoom comments at the end of the comments from the people who are here this evening.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners and staff. It's nice to see everyone in person again. Been a long time. Stephanie Harlan. I live on 42nd Avenue next to an apartment complex that has about 30 units. And so I kind of am experienced in what this would be like if you don't have enough parking. That unit next to me has one space per unit. So what does everybody do? They park on the street. They park down the street. They park on Grace Street. They park on Clare Street. And I see people walking, but they're walking to their cars. I see one lady that walks to work. She used to work at McDonald's. But everybody else, they walk to their car and get in their car and drive somewhere. I want to thank Mr. Ruth for his very wonderful synopsis of the history of Capitola. I came here in 1972, so I sort of witnessed some of that. We had I lived on Depot Hill in an apartment, and we had a candidates night, and we had Mr. Hill Nelson there. And afterwards, one of my neighbors said, "Did you get the message? Did you get the message?" And the message was slow down development, smaller development, keep in character with Capitola. So my big problem with this one is the parking, because it's going to be a problem. Absolutely. And everybody I've talked to in the last week has said so. So I hope that on these big projects, you walk the neighborhood and talk to people and see what they want. They'll tell you, and then you'll have your answer about how you'll vote. So I would strongly urge the developers to put in, or the city to require, absolutely put in solar. I put in solar panels at my house last year, made a huge difference in my bill. I'd rather pay them than PG&E. But absolutely, everybody should be doing solar right now. That only makes sense. And if they are going to put in these, they're going to have to, it's not a law yet, but they should do electric stoves, even though we don't like them, but rather than gas, because natural gas is just very, very expensive. So thanks for all your good work on this, and good luck. And affordable project is wonderful, but this just needs more parking. And I think it should have covered parking. It makes a huge difference. If you have your car out there and it's not covered, it gets really, really dirty. So I would ask them to cover those spaces too. It makes a big difference, and it would be nice. And maybe it's another place where they can put solar in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Good evening, Planning Commission and staff. I'm Paula Bradley. I live at 1841 44th Avenue, close to the project. And I've submitted a couple of letters. I still have questions that I posed that were not answered. I hope maybe tonight the developer could answer those questions since staff didn't. And my main issue is with parking, and inadequate parking is really the biggest issue to object to the project. I'm all for affordable housing. We certainly need it. But since there's only one parking space per unit, if the city doesn't feel like they can deny the request for reduced parking, then the residents, each unit should be limited to one car. That's doable. And if they can't do that, then offsite private parking. Another issue I have that I brought up before is the design on 44th Avenue. It looks like the rear or a side of a building, not a front of a building. 44th Avenue is a street frontage. It's got a parking driveway and then the end of a building with just one plain door, no front entries or breaking up the mass. Some of the questions I had, pretty easy ones to answer. I would like somebody to explain how the bicycle storage, the long-term bicycle parking works, because people are not going to use the storage if they have a bicycle. They can't carry heavy bicycles up the stairs. There's no elevator. If you want people to ride bicycles, there has to be secure parking that, can't be some system where it can't be broken into at night. Nobody's going to use it if it's not secure. Another thing, there was on the site plan, there's an area that looks like an oval, and I've asked, what is that? Is that a dog exercise area? And I certainly hope it is one, because with 36 more units, there's going to be a lot of dog walking in the neighborhood. I had a question about the perimeter fence. That was pretty easy to answer. Is it going to be a wall? That would be much more secure than it looks like on the plan, a wood fence. And I just want to say that this is a big project for Capitola. The ownership and management of the building is key to the success of the building, the residents becoming part of the community. So the developer and owner is very new. They don't have a track record, only a couple buildings completed. And the property manager also is new to the area. So I'm kind of concerned about their commitment to the city. Thank you.
I don't mean to contradict you, but I thought I saw an email that responded to most of those questions. Was that to a different person?
Yeah, no, that was the same one. I don't know what the explanation is, but we did try to respond to that email and we forwarded that response to the commission.
So we might be able to get you a copy of the response that staff did send out, answering most of your questions.
Hi, my name's Melody Newcomb. I've been to 3 meetings. The first one I came to, we got shut down. So I feel like really I'm at 2 meetings, right? I live directly across on 1763 44th, the first driveway. And right now on my street, we've had RVs, buses parking overnight. I did mention that I feel like I am the hall monitor down at that end of the street. And because they park and they trash. So there's already a problem, and now we're going to add more parking. I looked up the city of Capitola, and I looked up what your parking stuff is like, and where there's certain periods of time that people can park. And there is something called preferential parking zone. And, I thought that would be the only way I would feel like something like this would work. And preferential parking zone means that somebody can park there for like 3 hours, but they can't park overnight. And I have guests, I have people, that spend the night, but they won't be able to if all these people use these parking on my street. You have a variance for the type of vehicle that you can put in for the size of the parking space. But I can tell you, because I've worked in home care, and a lot of these people don't have small Volkswagens that are electric. They have trucks and they have vans and they have all kinds of different cars in order to survive. So your small parking spaces, some of those trucks are going to have to go somewhere. They're not going to make it in that parking lot. Right now, Uber delivers in the area, Amazon delivers, Brown delivers. We have a lot of ambulances and fire trucks that go down our street anyways because of the apartment complex across from you right now. I don't know where they're going to park to deliver, because they do. They deliver Amazon, they deliver Brown. So there's a real problem with parking. I look at that lot and it's less than 3/4 of an acre. I think about a 4-plex on it or an 8-plex on it or anything, but I think about a 36 unit with 36 parking spaces, and I just can't see it, to be honest with you. Capitola is a 2-by-2 square mile town, and 3/4 of an acre is going to have 36 units with probably close to 70 people living there. I wish another spot was better because I like affordable housing. I was in home care, so I would go into people's places and try to park. Where are those people going to park? Because believe me, you're going to have home care going in there too. So parking's my beef. Sorry. Please consider it.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for the timer. My name's Lisa Johnson, and I actually live in the city of Santa Cruz. And when I heard about this 36 unit, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, I'm ecstatic. So grateful. Kudos to Capitola. I'm a mother. I have grandchildren. I have 9 people living in my home because nobody can afford to live here. Parking is an issue everywhere. And you know what? We're going to figure it out. The other thing I see in this room is we definitely have an generational divide. We have elderly people who bought their homes a long time ago, live in a different world, and then we have people 45 and under who cannot afford to live here, who will be your home care people when you need them.
You need to address the commission.
So
of
I'm
the area.
addressing everybody because this is so important. That's why I'm here. Thank you. Thank you. We will figure it out together. People need places to live, especially working people. I'm 100% for it. And I wish the city of Santa Cruz would do more 100% affordable housing. Thank you. And thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jim Weller. I am a near neighbor to this project. I live just around the corner and up the street at 1970 46th Avenue. And I am very strongly in favor of this project. This is exactly the type of project that is needed at this location. It's an ideal location. Urban infill is what we need to do. Increasing density somewhat is what we need to do. I know that a lot of neighbors have complained about the parking. I'm not concerned about it. I live in a 50-unit apartment complex that was built about 50 years ago, where we have 1 parking space per unit. My neighbors are largely families with children. They're largely low-income Spanish-speaking people. It works fine for us. There are many neighbors like myself, at least some, who don't own a car at all. There are occupants of apartments who are children and don't drive cars. You don't need a parking space for every resident or even every 2 residents. So all in all, I find nothing to object to in this project. I applaud the developer. And I urge the commission to approve it. It seems like that's your only choice anyway, but I'm in favor. And I'll just say that I am also the lead developer for my church in Santa Cruz, where we're building a 40-unit apartment project. So I'm very familiar with the details and the standards. We also are providing fewer than 2.5 parking spaces per unit. We're providing 1.5 per unit, and we feel it's going to work just fine. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Sarto, and I'm a member of COPA, also Peace United Church. COPA is a regional organization of 28 faith-based and nonprofit institutions, and we are for housing for all. We find it magnificent that this will be an all affordable housing project. I personally have 5 children. They grew up here. They have all moved out of town because they can't afford to live here. They did all the things we asked them to. They got educations. One is a social worker, one is a hospice nurse. They were doing productive things for our society, and now they no longer live here. Housing is a regional problem, and I think you guys are doing a great job with this project. Thank you.
Good evening, Commission.
Good evening, Mr.
Nick
Ruth.
Ruth, let me state I'm elderly, but I live in the same world as people that are 30 and 40 years old. I'm just a little confused tonight because last week or last month at that hearing, I heard from staff that the commission does have the authority to require additional parking. And tonight I thought I heard different. So when the public hearing's over, if you could clarify that, I'd appreciate it. But for right now, I'd like to focus on parking. And last week I sent some questions to the staff, and Brian, thank you for answering those such detail. And one of the questions was, how many people can occupy a unit? And the answer is the reason why you should deny the waiver for the parking requirement. Each unit can have 2 people per bedroom plus 1. In 69 bedrooms, that's a possible total of 174 residents. Now, that's probably not likely going to happen, but it's not inconceivable that there could be 80 or 90 residents, and many of those could be driving age. It's not inconceivable that the overflow parking could be as many as 30 or 40 vehicles. Compounding the problem, there's no visitor parking that I'm aware of. So that's totally inadequate. And there's little or no on-street parking available in the close proximity in our overcrowded neighborhood streets. So what I want to do, we have a petition. I have copies for each one of you, and there's a copy for the clerk. It's signed by nearly every resident within realistic walking distance of the project. And what we're asking is, we're not against affordable housing. We're against shouldering the burden of the overflow parking on our already overcrowded streets. And especially when the solution is so simple. All you have to do is require more parking. And I believe you have the authority to do that. Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. Thank you for the time to speak. My name is Ryan Meckel. I'm here on behalf of Santa Cruz YIMBY in support of this project. The project in front of you tonight is a very great project. It's 36 units, it's 100% affordable, and it has a great mix of unit types, from studios to 1 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms, and even 3 bedrooms, now that I check my notes again. This is an opportunity to help people live closer to where they work, closer to where they shop, and closer to where they go to school. If you want to cut down on traffic on Highway 1 and people coming through Capitola who can't currently afford to live here right now, this is the project to do that. These are people living here who maybe work in Capitola right now, but they can't afford to live here. So they live in Watsonville. They live even further away, commute into Watsonville, causing the traffic that you see and many of you are upset about. If you want to support our climate crisis, this is another way to do that. When people don't have to drive as much, you're reducing your emissions and your reliance on automobile transit. And instead, with a project close to public transportation, and again, the needs of everyday life, people can walk and bike instead rather than drive. If you want to vote in support of a project, if you want to vote in support of families tonight, and in support of affordability, and in support of the future of Capitola's most essential workers, that project is before you tonight. I urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Just gonna put it down.
Yeah, sometimes hard to pull down.
Yeah. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm speaking in support of the 100% affordable housing development at 4401 Capitola Road. This development will bring 36 direly needed affordable homes to Capitola with a wide range of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom and studio units available for families. This project is located on a popular transit route near an abundance of amenities, including Capitola Public Library, Jade Street Park, several grocery stores, pharmacies, restaurants, really all places that residents of this development can walk to, that they can walk to with their children. Really just a magnificent project overall. And this is very personal to myself, because as a young renter who grew up in affordable housing, and really just seeing the opportunities that affordable housing can bring to oneself and their family members, I urge you to approve this development so everyone in Capitola can have the same opportunity. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nadine Burke. I live at 1525 47th Avenue, the corner of 47th and Garnet. This is my first time speaking, so thank you. I feel honored to be up here. I'd like to throw my support to what Mick Ruth said. If he had given me that petition, I would have signed it too. I'm in walking distance. My main objection to this is the parking ratio. I strongly believe it should be 1.5, which is more than what's on the table. I also have an issue with the height of these buildings. This will be the tallest building in Capitola. And I think I heard something about it's being approved to be 36 feet high. And I would like you to consider a design that is a 27-foot high, which would be more in the scale of our town. I also would like to add that I think there should be an additional hearing, because if one of the 5 hearings was kind of knocked out over a Zoom issue, that doesn't seem fair to me. So I would just urge you to add that back in. But overall, I do like the idea that somebody who makes $42,000 a year or $48,000 a year is going to have a place where they can live in Capitola. I totally get that, but I just agree with the people who've said that parking's going to be a problem, because it will. We see overflow parking all the time up and down the streets of the Jewel Box. So it's just something that needs to be figured out. Thank you so much.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Janine, and I have written separately in the packet in support of this project. I will add that my daughter lives in Capitola. She's along Kennedy Drive. She has developmental disabilities. She was very lucky to be able to find a place to live 8 years ago, loves it where she lives, but this is exactly the type of unit that peers of hers would really benefit from. And she doesn't have a car either. But really why I'm here tonight is a friend of mine organized some signatures on a letter, and we agreed that I would read it to you tonight. So I'm going to read something on behalf of someone else. Dear Planning Commissioners, we understand that you are considering an affordable housing project on Capitola Road at 44th Avenue at your meeting on March 2nd. That location is directly across the street from where we operate a successful salon. We're pleased to contribute to Capitola's economy with our business. Like so many others who work in Capitola, we don't live in Capitola. It's too expensive to own or rent here, or there aren't available places. We commute from Watsonville, Live Oak, San Lorenzo Valley, or other parts of Santa Cruz County. This project would add 36 affordable homes, and some of them are sized for families, 2 or 3 bedrooms. We wanted you to hear from people like us who work and shop in Capitola and would like to live here. We'd like to get our cars off of Highway 1. We'd like to walk or bike to work, to groceries, and to other services. Capitola needs more affordable housing, so please move the project forward. It's from Evelyn, Nicole, Anita, Rochelle, Kendra, Anissa, Chase, Kim, Tori, Caroline, and Tamra. And I will be leaving the letter here if you'd like to
Leave
see
it
it.
with the city
Oh,
clerk.
okay, great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And thank you again.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And thank you to staff for taking on the challenge of the state mandates, which don't always recognize the unique characteristics of a town like ours. When I sat in your seat about a dozen years ago, there were some tough projects that came before me. And I knew that one thing we needed to do is always speak on behalf and think on behalf of those who reside here and those who have businesses here. I'm not against this project in a general sense, but I'm definitely against the fact that only 1 space per unit for parking, as many others have said, is completely inadequate. I just want to make sure that whatever you decide, make sure you condition it, not just for this particular moment at this point in time, but conditions that'll last to keep parking alive, all these issues, to make sure we can keep addressing these things over time. So please stand tall. They have an attorney. We have an attorney. Please stand tall and do what's right for our citizens and our business owners of the community, while also serving those who are not as privileged. Thank you.
Good evening, Kathy Howard. I like affordable housing. I think it's great. I have grandkids that need places to live here. They don't make $100,000 to be able to rent. But what I do object to is the traffic and the parking that it is going to produce. And those of us who have lived here know that is a real true thing. We cannot deny that. I have driven down those streets several times since your last meeting, and there is not one time that I have not seen those streets almost totally full of cars parked. Not for businesses, just parked. And in all of the neighborhoods, many of us rent our extra rooms out and have provided housing. And we understand for students and other people that need a place to live. We aren't selfish that way. We do try to meet those needs, but it has also caused parking problems in our neighborhoods. And I think that to not allow or to waive the elevator is a wrong thing. We have people here who need wheelchairs, who would be affordable housing for them. To waive that kind of a thing, at least to have it on part of the units so it's available to them. So I don't think it should be so selective. I don't think it should be so stripped down that there is nothing that comes with that. But definitely the parking is a huge issue. And I really would be very sad that you would not take that into consideration for this town.
Good evening. I wasn't planning on talking until somebody said there's a generational divide. Well, last time I checked, I'm not elderly and I do not support this project. I support to have housing for those who need it, but the parking is an issue. But it's not just an issue for our convenience. It's an issue of safety. I said it last meeting I was here and I'll say it again. My 16-year-old daughter comes home in the dark, and if she can't find a parking spot close to our house on 45th Avenue because of the overflow parking that's going to happen, that is a community safety issue. To have to park far away from your home and be a 16 or 17-year-old girl walking in the dark back to your home. So I really want you to understand that parking is not a convenience, but a safety issue. You also said that it is inevitable that this decision, whatever you make tonight, will be appealed. Make that appeal happen on the builder's shoulders, not on the shoulders of your residents that you are here to represent. I'm also a teacher. Guess what? I don't make a lot of money, but I make more than I can if to live in a place like this. So to say that, oh, it's going to be great for, teachers and other members of the community. Well, we are stuck as teachers in this. Don't make enough, but you make too much. So it's not going to solve that problem either. So there's a lot to think about still. Please consider saying no tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dominic Svensson. I live on Capitola Road. I've been living there for quite a while in the Jewel Box. I was just fortunate to be able to purchase my home not that long ago. And when I was searching for a home, I was looking for the character of neighborhood. And there is not a single 3-story building in that whole neighborhood. So the height of the buildings, all of it out of character for the neighborhood. If it was a 2-story building, I wouldn't have such a big problem with it, being that it's going to be right in my side of view too. And also parking is a big issue. I know they have studies on traffic. I live on Capitola Road. I hear that traffic all day long. And there are going to be people living there. They're going to have friends coming. They're going to have friends driving around up and down the streets looking for parkings. It's just my only concern. I think affordable housing is great for the community. It's great for everybody. But I'm just saying that 3-story buildings is a little bit out of character for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Bruce. I live on Crystal Street. I'm not going to get into the aesthetics of the building and so on and so forth because that's not part of what we're here talking about. But Having lived there for several years and off and on for about 50 years, if you look at the general area now at 5 o'clock, there's traffic packed up from the Capitola stop sign to 41st Avenue. Parking is already a problem, especially for us elderly people who have a hard time getting to our cars sometimes. So we have limited access street at one end of the Jewel Box from 3 to 6 because of the traffic. We have a one-way street on Crystal Street. One end is one way because of the traffic patterns. It's undeniable that this many units with this many bedrooms is not going to just compound those traffic problems. And when we want to talk about bicycles and alternative transportation, the more cars that are on Capitola Road, the more unsafe and unrealistic it becomes to ride a bike. I mean, I ride a bike and I avoid that area. So I think there are, certainly a number of safety issues at stake here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Sherman. I live on Crystal Street, and I'm not opposed to low-income housing, but I am opposed to rejiggering the rules to make a project fit that is obviously not in any other circumstance wouldn't fly here. And I don't think it's fair to push off visitor parking into our neighborhood, excess parking. Who's going to police that? Is there rental service going to check the people who live there, make sure they only have one car per unit? Or, who's going to be the one? I know who's going to be the one. It's going to be me yelling at the creep parking out in front of my house every night. It happens all the time. There's a steady stream at my end of Crystal Street of people parking at my street, putting on their black shirt, their black trousers, their windbreakers, and walking down into the village and working for the night. They come back about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night and they leave. Well, when I come home from work and I can't find a place to park because some waiter is parked there, I'm not a happy camper. And I would venture to say that probably everyone at that podium has more than one vehicle. And so what's good for you should be good for every one of us. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else here in the audience who would like to have an opportunity to speak before we go to our Zoom people? Seeing no one, I think we can.
We have 5 participants. Alicia Webster. I don't have a microphone.
Okay.
Here, so you'll need to
Okay.
Follow Alicia Webster. I have Mike Akbar, and then Wagner. Those are the
Okay.
first 3, and then we'll know the next.
Okay.
The next 3 after that.
So Kalisha, what she needs to do is to unmute herself.
So Kalisha Webster will be the first speaker, and she has been asked to unmute herself, and she should be able to speak for 3 minutes, beginning now.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Kalisha Webster, and I'm the Senior Housing Advocate at Housing Choices, a nonprofit service provider supporting people with developmental and other disabilities to find and retain affordable housing throughout Santa Cruz County. I'm calling in support of CRP Affordable Housing's proposed affordable housing project at 4401 Capitola Road, which will include 36 affordable homes at the deepest levels of affordability. Capitola is home to nearly 80 adults with developmental disabilities, more than half of whom are still living at home with aging parents or living in segregated institutional settings, not by choice, but because of a lack of deeply affordable housing available to them in the city. For this vulnerable population, many of whom are on fixed incomes from disability benefits or working part-time in low-wage jobs, remaining in the family home puts them at high risk of displacement or homelessness when parents are no longer able to provide the housing and support that they require due to the high cost of housing in Capitola. CRP Affordable Housing's proposed development at 4401 Capitola Road would not only help the city in meeting its RHNA goals for the deepest levels of affordability, which are most difficult to achieve, but most importantly, it will create homes for the most vulnerable members of the community. By including 25 homes with project-based vouchers, CRP Affordable Housing project will affirmatively further fair housing by creating housing opportunities for the city's lowest income residents and special needs populations, such as seniors and people with disabilities. Housing Choices strongly supports the development of this project, which will be located near transit, shopping, and services, as proximity to community amenities is key to fostering inclusive communities for residents with disabilities who often do not drive or own cars. We urge you to approve this project to move forward with the development process and hope to see the housing potential of the site maximized in order to create a more inclusive and sustainable Capitola. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker will be Mike Ackar. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I live on 44th Avenue, and I am strongly opposed to this project. First of all, I never got a notice. I had a friend of mine call me that this just happened today. The developer is on drugs if he doesn't think that he's going to destroy the community. I mean, he is completely disregarding all of the neighbors there. I mean, this is the most outrageous proposal I've ever seen in my life. And I have a degree in architecture. And let me tell you something else. The tenants that live there are going to be disserviced because there's no parking whatsoever. And when you have no parking, what happens is it goes out to the entire neighborhood. And then the visitors come, and then they have parties, they get drunk, they throw up, they defecate all over the neighborhood, and it just becomes total mayhem. And Capitola is not a place for that. The second thing I want to talk about is the height of the building. It's totally outrageous. I think that they should be doing underground parking if they need more parking. And it just seems like this project is there just to make the developer rich. It's really not for the community, because we are the community. And I'm just really offended by this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker will be somebody named Wagner. If you could please unmute yourself, you're going to have 3 minutes to speak, starting now.
Hi, I'm Paul Wagner. I'm a 24-year Capitola resident. Prior to that, I was a Santa Cruzan, a member of the Downtown Housing Commission, and member and then chair for several years, of the City Council's Housing Advisory Committee. And first, I want to thank you for opening this meeting to those of us who are remote. Second, I want to express sympathy for having to deal with state requirements, which have changed quite a bit since 2017. Concerning the project itself, this kind of project is the way that human beings all over the world stopped from despoiling the environment and ripping up plants and taking up all the space and left nature alone. First, at an intersection of roads, a commercial business would open, then several, and then right around it, high-density housing. This is the best kind of growth that one can do. It's intelligent, it's environmentally responsible, and it works. I just would like to say one thing about parking, and that is that I've lived in my younger years as a poor musical performer in several places that accommodated people with 30% or so median income. The last place, a couple decades ago, was the St. George Hotel in Santa Cruz. There were 100 plus residents there. 3 of the residents had cars. Over 97 did not. I think that when you're talking about housing that's this low income, you really don't have to worry about there being 1 parking space per unit. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
The next speaker will be, they're in the Zoom as Equity Transit. They've been allowed to speak and they'll have 3 minutes beginning now.
Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lonnie Faulkner, Director of Equity Transit, and we recommend support for 4401 Capitol Road and all affordable housing development. I live less than 1.5 miles from this development in Live Oak. The very people that serve in this community, teachers, police officers, bus drivers, restaurant workers, nurses, as we heard earlier, hair salon stylists have increasingly been forced to move out of the community they serve and must battle hours of traffic each day as they commute to and from cities like Hollister, Salinas, Los Banos, and beyond, which means that our essential workers have little time with their families, sharing simple things like dinner together or attending their kids' after-school games. A lack of affordable housing means much of our workforce cannot live in the community they serve, which means they have little time to pursue life beyond work and sitting in a car traveling to and from work in traffic. While we desperately need missing middle housing, this housing development helps us meet a need for low and ultra low income residents. This project is fantastic in that it is near major transit corridor, easy biking and walking to shopping, restaurants, library, and has all the hallmarks of a solid infill proposal. Developing denser housing infill is far more economically wise for our city than developing housing that results in further sprawl. Developing along our transit corridors, minimizing parking and providing secure bike parking, encouraging rideshare, and giving all residents transit passes are critical if we're going to address the climate crisis and meet our climate action plan goals. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about the issue of parking, and I do feel for that. I have a lot of feelings about that. However, we do need to think in terms of the bigger picture, which is our climate crisis issue. If you look at the book, The High Cost of Parking by Donald Shoup, 1 parking space costs about $50,000 to $80,000. Creating limited parking moves us into a future where really we can get rid of cars and lower traffic. But the necessary balance to that is increasing public transportation. And public transportation really is the way we're going to address climate, equity, and many other issues. State requirements indicate we must build a significant numbers of new housing, but how we build and for whom we build is very important. We must support the development of smart, affordable, and missing middle infill projects. And this all affordable housing project proposed at 4401 Capitola Road. Just want to mention the balance of community gathering spaces and wild spaces and older structures. All of this together creates a dense urban infill near public transit, which ensures.
Unfortunately, she ran out of time. The next speaker is going to be Tim Willoughby. Tim, if you could please unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Tim Willoughby. I'm speaking for Affordable Housing Now. I'd just like to point out a couple of things. The first one is that a lot of you wouldn't know this, but I know people are upset that the bonus density provides some limitations on what local governments can do, and there's a lot of focus on parking in particular this evening. You should know that the fund, as was mentioned by the developer, that the funding sources for 100% affordable housing projects dictate even more requirements than the city does. And they take into account the distance to jobs, the distance to schools, the distance to shopping, and the frequency of bus availability. So in terms of parking, part of the funding requirements have already looked at this and said, this is a good location for it. And the second thing I'd like to point out is that there are thousands of people on the Housing Authority wait list. And they don't get to speak for this tonight because they're busy working. So I'd like to speak for them, for all the thousands of people that are anxiously awaiting one of these apartments. Please move it forward. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Carlos Romero. Carlos, if you could please unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is Carlos Romero, and thank you for having me. And then I'm also a COPA leader. And then I would like to share a little about my story. I'm a CNA, nursing assistant certificate. I work in a local skilled nursing facility. Luckily, since I've been working as a CNA, I've been riding my bicycle, walking to work, and only time that when I walk to work is when the weather is not that great, so I had to drive. I live by right now live in Rosedale and Hill Street, so which is like I just walk like 20 minutes to work, and my pharmacy, CVS, all my shopping. I do my shopping locally here, and this project will be a dream come true for many co-workers. They commute from Watsonville, Gilroy, Hollister, out of the town, Salinas, and with this project, we will help a lot of families. And if I know it's a problem with the parking, but if we think about it, we just been helping a lot of families with trying making living. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The next speaker is going to be Andrew Goldenkrantz. Andrew, if you please unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, commissioners. I am on the board of Santa Cruz Community Health. We serve, we're a primary healthcare clinic. We have about 175 employees and serve 12,000 people. One of the things that we've seen is that when we talk to patients about their healthcare needs and what gets in the way of them having better health, the number one issue that comes up is housing stress for all the reasons that you've heard for the last hour. And so we see, I want to stress the point that availability of affordable housing in an infill place, as has been stated before, is really key to building a healthy community. And I think that's what we all want as members of this community. The other thing that I want to bring up is the concerns. I appreciate people's concerns about parking. And I know that's an issue. And one of the things that's hard, but I know that commissioners are aware of this and the city council is aware of this, is that the law has changed so that while historically parking was evaluated merely on the basis of what's happening on that block or in that neighborhood, at this point, housing is evaluated, housing proposals are evaluated based on the idea of total vehicles mile traveled. And so what that means is that if people are being able to live in a place that's closer to work, closer to shopping, closer to public transit, that ultimately the car pressure is less. And it gets us away from thinking that the rights of cars are going to supersede the rights of people to live in a healthy community. So I'll leave it at that. And we totally support this project and hope that you move forward with it. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Roger Shaheen. Roger, if you could please unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Beginning now.
Okay, thank you so much. What a spirited conversation. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. At least my neighbors did. One neighbor heard about it, and none of us, I repeat, none of us in the Jewel Box neighborhood that I know of received a placard or anything for that matter. One neighbor who I reached out to said that he received one that said that this particular situation or this particular issue was going to happen at 6 p.m. So there's been a lot of confusion in this whole situation. In learning that the previous meeting was canceled, or not canceled because Zoom had a malfunction, that was considered a meeting. I know that's brought up like 3 or 4 or 5 times so far. You must do something about that. That should not be a meeting. I mean, let's be clear. That's not a meeting. My issue is this. Look, I know you guys are in a tough spot. The state and federal level really needs and recommends more housing. And I'm not opposed to trying to help the low income community, because that's important. I know that people need a place to live, and it's difficult. And Santa Cruz County is the most expensive area to live in the country, one of the most. But my issue is this: you're approving a really big project on a very busy street. There's already been a person that was hit and almost fatally died this last year, a neighbor, and she was just walking across the street. Now that could happen anywhere, but when you have 36 units with many, many, many bedrooms and many people that can live in each bedroom, there's going to be more cars than just one spot per unit. And so have you thought about the idea of underground parking, or more parking than one space per unit? Because that's not going to solve anything. It's not even going to be helpful for the people who live there. Very, very seldom, with a family of 4, 5 maybe that are going to live there, in some units, they're going to have more than one car. And there's just simply not enough parking. And what's going to happen is it's going to, as everyone said, it's going to spill into the neighborhoods. And then what happens is you get more crime. You get people that say, oh, there's more cars. Let's go break into those cars. And our Capitola Police is already, responding to every single incident that they possibly can. You're just increasing massive amounts of stress on our already taxed infrastructure. I'm really surprised that I have to hear about this so secondhand. And it's just such a giant project, which again, I think your hands are.
Sorry about that, Roger. Ran out of time. The next speaker is going to be John. If you could please unmute yourself. You're going to be allowed to speak for 3 minutes, beginning now.
Hey guys, it's me. I would just like to ask us all a question, and it's, what would Jesus do? Would he house our police officers, our teachers, our nurses? Would he build this very reasonable project? I think low-income housing in Capitola is something like $93,000 a year qualifies you. These fears about parking are genuine, but in a community where a significant number, something like 30% of our residential homes are second homes anyway, we already have room. And I also want to just end with one statistic. Capitola's population, the most people who ever lived in our community, peaked in 1990, 33 years ago. The congestion is from people driving in to get to work, to get to their doctors, to reach our services here. And if we're not the sort of community that shares our services and builds a place for families, we're a dying place, y'all. And that's a real sadness for me, because I really love this place. Thank you. Have a great night.
The final speaker with their hand raised in Zoom is Reggie. Reggie, if you could please unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, beginning now.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I live in Midtown of Santa Cruz. And so I'm about 5 minutes away from downtown of Capitola, 5 minutes away from downtown of Santa Cruz. And so I just want to say that this project is sorely needed. It's a great project. I think the fact that you have one parking space per unit is totally fine. Particularly because this day and age, the reason why people tend to have a lot of parking or a lot of need for multiple vehicles is because you have multiple people in a household holding down multiple jobs they need to commute to because rents are so high. People are spending most of their income paying a landlord to live somewhere. But this housing situation removes that restriction on people because it actually is more in line with what people make. Now, I know it's 30% affordable relative to AMI. I don't like AMI. I don't think it's very representative of what people actually make. I think if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and you look at like the wages per industry, I think that's a much more apt way of understanding what people are making for income in a given area, because that's your local economy and not just like people who are living there but working in a different city. But this is all just to say, I think this is a great project. I think it would be a real shame for some selfish homeowners who have some pretty obvious bigotries against people who make, honestly, not even, these aren't even low wages, right? Like I said, this is the average wage. Most people you meet are making this kind of money. And this is what it takes to have affordable housing for them. So yeah, even if you're bigoted against the poor, these are not even poor people. So yeah, let it happen. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the last of the.
So we do have a couple more speakers. Actually, I think I spoke too soon here.
Okay.
The next speaker is going to be, they're labeled as Kay in the Zoom. Kay, if you could please unmute yourself, you'll be allowed to speak. So the full name's not listed, but again, if you are labeled as Kay in Zoom, it's your turn to speak. You'll have 3 minutes. Following that, we have Ralph Vernacchia. Looks like the first person's having trouble. So Ralph, if you could please unmute yourself, you can have 3 minutes to speak and we'll circle back to the other person.
All right. I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah.
Great.
All right. So yeah, I live on Crystal Street and I've been there since 2006 and I'm not against the project, but I am very concerned about the parking. Crystal Street already has a lot of cars on it. And I think that if you're going to build this big project, I don't see why you can't put underground parking to accommodate additional parking for the units. I also think that if they can't put additional parking, is the city going to look at, or the town going to look at putting permit parking around the area, so that way the people that actually live on those streets could actually have parking in front of their houses. That's all I had. Thank you.
So the only person with their hand raised at the moment is Kay. Kay, you have been allowed to speak. If you would like to unmute yourself and speak, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Kim Howard, and I would like to speak on this issue here. Oh, bear with me 1 second here. I'm having a little bit of a problem. I'd like to propose a change to this proposal to the council. I'd like to propose a change to the parking to be included. To be included in this would be visitor parking and temporary spaces for deliveries, as well as services needed. I'd like to propose access via an elevator to the developers. If this structure is the idea of servicing people with needs beyond the ability to have access to a 3rd story. I'd like to propose that there would be a real view of the bicycle access parking. And what does that look like? And if they would be more transparent about that, I'd like the council to act in our favor as a community and look at these proposals. I'd also like to highlight the issue of safety for walking, biking, and driving. Recently in November, 2022, a resident was walking and hit while in the crosswalk. It was exactly at this location. I'd like to propose a loop around the buildings versus in and out of access in both areas. Is that possible? What would that look like? I'd also like to highlight the fact that a lot of people have talked about different income brackets for teachers, police, people within walking distance. And most of those people, if the criteria is under $48,000, do not meet that criteria because they make just above that. So is that criteria changing or is it within that limit? I'd also like to highlight the tightness of the streets and the parking in this area. A resident was hit and killed about approximately 6 years ago in a neighborhood near New Brighton. It was due to lighting as well as parking and those kinds of issues, parking on the street, the same issue what we're going around and around in circles about. So I'd just like to propose all these things and give them to the council to check out before they approve this proposal.
Okay, that was
the last
That was the
speaker.
last of the-
There are no other persons with their hands raised at this time. If there's anybody on Zoom who would like to speak during the public hearing, this would be the time to raise your hand in the Zoom app.
Okay, I'm assuming there's no one else on the
There are no
Zoom
further
app and
speakers.
there's no one else here in the auditorium that would like to speak. So we will give the applicant, as we said we would, 3 minutes if you would like to speak. There's no requirement for you to do that before we close our public hearing. Yeah, I think that'll be part of your closing 3 minutes since that's part of your design team.
Yes, excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. This is, my name is Robert Lindley. I'm principal with Studio T-Square and I'm the project architect. I did take notes on all of the speakers who came forward to offer opinions tonight, and I want to thank all of them for their constructive comments. And I do have responses to several of the comments that were raised. So I thought if I could just go through those quickly, that would be helpful. Number one is we are doing solar for the project. This is not future solar. This is going to be solar panels that will be installed on day one of the project and serve the project throughout the life of its, being online. Next is that we are an all electric building. We are not bringing any gas to the building. So it's a, greenhouse gas free building. One comment about the 44th Street facade having no entrance. All of the entrances in this building are clustered around the stairwells that feed from the back of the unit. So we do have windows to activate that 44th Street elevation. And the one door that you see is for a needed electrical room for basically for our electrical equipment. Our bike storage is provided in a fully secured, lighted interior room on the project. It's directly adjacent to the outdoor courtyard that people will be passing through all the time. It's right next door to the laundry. It's right next door to the community room. And it'll be locked. It will be lighted inside, and we will have enough space for bicycles for all of the units in the project. And they are all at an accessible elevation for people with disabilities. To address, there was a comment made. A couple of folks thought it was important to have an elevator in the building to serve people with special needs and people with disabilities. We completely agree with that. So actually all of the ground floor units in the project will be either fully accessible on day one or fully adaptable for people to who need special accommodations going forward. So fully 1/3 of the units in the building can serve people with physical disabilities. And then that goes to the elevator idea is also something I wanted to talk about in terms of the thought about doing underground parking. Underground parking for a project of this size would be just inordinately expensive, and it would then require elevator, mechanical ventilation, a lot of ongoing maintenance. Just having a ramp to get down to an elevator to subterranean parking would take up a lot of surface area. We would then preclude the idea of having trees in the landscape and a lot of other really nice amenities.
I think we need to bring you to a halt. We agreed that we would give you an extra 3 minutes, which we don't normally do. So I think it's time for this to come back.
Can I just ask?
And I just want to say that we're available for any questions as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I was just going to say, as available in terms of availability for questions, I'd
Right.
like to question the architect to finish
Yeah,
his
you're-
comments. Can I do that?
Sure.
Yes, I'm available.
Okay. Okay, I don't think that we're going to give people a second opportunity to speak. Everybody got one opportunity. And so if they've had spoken once, there won't be a second time.
So I think I did cover all of the points that I had noted in my notes here. So if there are further questions from the commissioners, I'd be happy to field those.
I don't think there are at this time, but we appreciate you being available to answer them if they come up later.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to close the public portion of this hearing, and we're going to bring it back to the commission for deliberations. And I think we might want to spend a minute talking about how we want to do this. I mean, we can certainly give each person the time to go through their list. I'm wondering, since parking seems to be, the major issue of the evening, if we want to get a couple clarifications about where we are in relationship to parking and the state laws.
In terms of questions of staff,
Questions of staff.
I'm all for that.
Okay. Is that okay? Yeah. Because I think parking seems to be the major concern for most people about this particular project, the number one concern. And as planning commissioners, we did all receive a letter from our city attorney clearly explaining to us that projects of this type are allowed to have 4 concessions, and that as a public body, as a planning commission, those 4 concessions they are entitled to, and that we do not have authority to deny them those 4 concessions. And one of the concessions which they have asked for is to have a parking ratio of 1 space per unit. And so I think a number of us have looked at various ways, tried to find some loopholes where we could have more parking because a number of people in town feel quite strongly that the parking that's being provided is not adequate. And it's my understanding from our city attorney and from our staff and several other people we have communicated with that requiring them to have additional parking is not something that we can do. In fact, they could actually build this project with no parking. And so I don't, if staff would like to add something.
Sure. No, I just want to confirm that exactly what you just stated, Chair Westman, that is correct. That within a density bonus application, the applicant has the ability to ask for a concession to parking. And in this circumstance, they've asked for a decrease of parking under the city's code. We require 2.5 spaces per unit. Under state density law, there's a minimum required of 1.5 spaces, but they're right following that requirement within state density law is the ability, it's very clear that they're allowed to ask for a waiver or concession for parking on site. So they have come in with the 1 parking per unit request.
Right. Okay, well, I just wanted us to all understand where we are. And I think people need to appreciate this is not something the city of Capitola has decided on or imposed. This is a new requirement in state law. There have been over 100 new laws in the last 6 years relating to what cities can require on these kinds of developments. So
if we're just on parking, I can talk specifically about that.
Yeah.
So I'm on the parking commission, as it turns out, and we just are about to submit our final report. But as Paul pointed out, most of the parking issues revolve around the village. But we are aware of the dense parking problems associated with the village. And so if this jewel box is going to now become and start to see some of those issues as well. Just to let you know that the way around that is with parking permits and restricted signage. That seems to be the solution that has been brought forward throughout the rest of the village. There is, you might also note, the city council is going through their budgeting process. They have a surplus. They're looking, actually talking about putting major funds aside for special projects. Perhaps the public should reach out and say parking structures, public transit. Maybe those are the kinds of things that we need to focus the city council's funds on. So there are workarounds or answers that we can address regarding the parking issue in addition to trying to lay it on the applicant's lap. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, so I get the point. You're here for 55 years, and 55 years from now, you don't know how things are going to be. And in fact, people may be transporting themselves around the planet like Star Trek, right? But in the short term, since parking is obviously a big issue, have you reached out to the Lomac group? Have you reached out to the mall owners, to anybody to give the community a short-term solution to this problem while we work out the longer-term parking issue? Have you taken any action to that? I mean, literally across the street from y'all is a parking lot that will be empty at night. And they, on the weekends, at least Sundays, provide parking for the church. So why aren't you talking to them as part of your effort to build community support for this project?
So I think it would be appropriate for you to come up and speak in the microphone so we can have your answer recorded.
Thank you. Like I said, we meet all the state laws. If it is an issue, we will look into that. So.
Well, it appears as though it's going to be an issue. So I think you ought to at least think about what you're going to do when that happens, once this project is up and running, because your on-site manager is going to get inundated with complaints from the community based on this conversation.
Yeah, we'll take that into consideration.
Okay.
Hey, why don't we start down at this end with questions and we'll work our way
Could
down.
I
Could I actually
sorry.
just interject really quick, just to spin off of your comment? Is there any action that the city can take, proactive measures to contact the LOMAT group to, because it sounds like there's not only a problem with, proposed parking that's going to be introduced to this area, but there's already an existing problem. Is there any way that we can, organize something to where the general public, as it stands now, development or not, can use the parking areas, or some arrangement that can be made to where the guys getting dressed in the black to go wait tables down in Capitola can use those parking lots? Is there some type of?
We definitely have the ability to reach out and talk to property owners within Capitola and ask questions. Whether or not we could condition this project to have ongoing agreements with those property owners, I think we need to do some research regarding the law like whether or not we could condition. I would assume that, I won't even make assumptions, but that's something we can look into. But we definitely have the ability to reach out to property owners towards resolutions and assisting the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I kind of looked at it from a different perspective. I understand the parking is one parking space per unit. To get around the elevator requirement, 6 of the units is going to be are going to be accessible. So that is requiring 6 handicap spots. Is there a restriction on those 6 units only being rented to somebody with disabilities or anything? And if not, your management plan that your parking management plan says that you'll be enforcing California Vehicle Code so that no one will be able to park in those handicap spots unless they're handicapped. So that would be net. If no one qualified for that, the parking spots in your project as designed would be 30 spots at the time. Is that correct?
So just to be clear, there is no elevator requirement for a 3-story building for any type of development, affordable or not. It's not a requirement. So we're not skirting any elevator requirement. On all of our projects, these type of projects, they have people with disabilities. Those always get filled. But yes, those stalls are for people with disabilities. They get assigned those, but we always have those. They're always filled.
Sorry for the skirting. I meant in the way you guys, in your description of your project, you say you're going to have 6 accessible units. And so the 6 accessible units would have a requirement for a handicap spot. And I think that's how you came up to the 6, because 6 is over than what's, I think, required. Is that correct?
I would have to defer to our architect on that, but
I was just trying to get to the point that if there aren't handicap people that require handicap parking, then there's really actually only 30 parking spots that are going to be available for the residents to use.
I guess you could say that, but we definitely have disabled people living in these at all times, and so they're absolutely needed.
Okay. My next question was on your main sheet. You guys have listed out in the verbiage on the general sheet talking about EV parking spaces. And there's 2 EV parking spaces, and I think it falls under the California Green Code, and you guys listed out, 4106, whatever. And then you also talked about it also has to confirm with California Building Code. As I went back and looked at that code and reviewed it, it states to me as I read it, and I was wondering if you guys could clarify that. That says where spaces are provided for parking and shall be provided in accordance with this section. For the purpose of those sections, vehicle charging stations are not parking spaces. So that per the California Building Code, two of those parking spaces that are clearly defined as electrical charging stations that I think is mandated by the Green Code. I was just wondering, was it how you guys are going to handle that situation? And was that going to be net less 2 parking spaces additionally?
I would defer to the architect, but the way I understand it is that's for the calculation, for the tabulation of parking stalls. That's not necessarily how we would handle it as a management company.
Right. I was just trying to get to, I just want to make sure that we understood the amount of parking spaces that were being required per unit, where everybody in the unit is going to be allowed to use them. Because how I read the code, and maybe I'm wrong, and the architect could clarify for me, if the California vehicle, if the building code says EV are not supposed to be, can't be used for parking spaces. I think
In the parking tabulation for a typical building, that would require 2.5 spaces per unit. But for this, it's not really, it's a weird area, right, where it doesn't really add up the same thing. But as a management company, we have no residents with EV cars. We're not gonna not assign those stalls to another car. But then if somebody comes in with an EV car, then you'd have a shuffle.
yeah, I was just trying to follow through the management plan. So I was just my couple questions about the parking. Going back to the parking, I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, and maybe Katie, you can elaborate. Obviously it wouldn't be a condition for the applicant, but and maybe it's something that we want to look at is permit parking or preferential parking or whatever the zoning code or whatever the codes are. That maybe that should be discussed, and I think that'd be something that probably should be discussed early on before the project, because then I think it's going to automatically kick in if the project's built. Well, then the people in that project that are living there, they'd be able to get permit parking to park in their neighborhood too. So I think if that is something that's going to gain momentum, and that's something it should probably be discussed way early ahead of time. So those are my couple questions I had regarding the parking. I had about what the real number represented, and actually how many people will be able to park there. So thank you for responding to those.
Thank you.
So do you have any other comments or questions you want to make about the project?
I thought we were talking just about parking.
No, this is,
okay.
we've covered parking now. You
Okay,
could go
perfect.
with anything you would like.
Yeah, my next one was regarding safety, and we brought the safety issue up before, and we appreciate that you guys went out and got a independent traffic report done. I looked at the traffic study from Hexagon, I think it was, and they said that it looked like it conformed and there wasn't a safety issue. My issue that I had, and maybe we could bring it up, they referred to that there was a driveway width of 24 feet, and the plans show that is 20 feet. So that's like a deduction of like 16%. And so I was wondering, was that a typo in the report? Was there an error in that? Because if it's safe at 24 feet and the drawings show it at 20 feet, which is 16% less, I was just wondering if that can it be reviewed? And I mean, I don't know if we can want to look at that or just take that for if anybody else saw that, or is your architect is on board? Was there a mistake on the drawings, or was the traffic report incorrect?
Why don't we give the architect and the staff a
Sure,
chance?
it's just,
to
it's on sheet, okay, it's on sheet A1 is the drawings which show the dimension, and then it was their attachment from Hexagon that refers to that the parking width is 24 feet at the driveway. And
No,
as I read the plans,
that's
it
a
shows
good
20.
question, which we should get answered.
Yeah.
Just give them a chance to.
Sure. And let's see. And maybe you could I tried to go back and try to respond to some of these questions that were asked from the community. We've talked a lot about the building being 36 feet tall. Is there a design code that states, I think we had some interaction last time about ceiling heights and stuff like that. Could you elaborate that so the community would know what that looks like and why the building is at 36 feet?
Yeah, so typically for each level, you're gonna have around 10 feet or so of space. So you have a foot of ceiling space. So you have 9-foot ceilings in the majority of the unit, and in the bedroom or in the bathrooms and hallways, you have your mechanical equipment, which brings the ceiling down to around 7'8", 7'6". Any lower than that, and it's not functionable or livable, right? Nobody wants to live in a 7-foot high ceiling space in a bathroom, and I think it's actually against the building code. So when you add all that up, plus a pitched roof, we're as low as we can get and still have a functioning 3-story building.
Okay, so and I think I'm just trying to get clarification because I've read many of the comments. So to get to the 36 feet, you have a 9-foot ceiling from just roughly, you have a 9-foot ceiling in the place. You have a foot of framing And so you add that up, that gets you to your 30 feet. And then you have designed the building to have a 4 and 12 pitch in some areas and 6 and 12 in other areas, which brings up to the 36. So it's purely outside of the 30 feet, like if we use your measurements, that you have to have the rest of it to get to the 36 is from a design or aesthetic parapet, trying to screen the equipment and stuff like that.
Right. We could stop it at the 30 feet and add your roof trussing, and then it would be terrible though. It would, that's an aesthetic.
Yeah, I was just trying to help everybody get to, like when we talked about a building being 36 feet tall, why I was just trying to get to why that is. The next question I had, I think you responded to that. Height, parking, we talked about that. You guys were looking at the driveway, which I appreciate. I think that's all I have right now. If there's one more, if I could come back at the end, if I find one more question.
Sure. So can we answer the driveway width question at this point?
Yeah, excuse me. So the flare at the curb cut is 24 feet. And then the aisle itself is dimensioned out at 20 feet on the plans, which is the zoning ordinance standard for a two-sided 90-degree parking lot design. So I'm not, it's probably a typo in the report, but in any case, it does meet the city standard, the zoning standard for parking lot design.
Okay, so just to clarify, so the way it's designed, it meets the city, and just the traffic report that said that it was a safe approach. That was just probably a typo, you're saying?
Looks like he repeated the dimension 24 feet twice.
Yeah.
And that only applies to the flare at the driveway apron.
Okay. And just if we, when we talk about that, on the east side of the parking lot, if I remember correctly from our last meeting, you put in a no parking zone so that if a car came in, they would be able to drive in. It's the same, both of them now appears to be the same width. So on the east side, you could drive in and there'd be a no parking, so somebody could, I think your words were maybe safely be able to try to turn around, come back out. And then we don't have that on the west side parking lot. And that parking lot, it appears to be, I think, longer maybe. Was there a thought process around why there wasn't a no parking on that side and was just on the other side?
Yeah, the original traffic study done by Dudek suggested to add that no parking so that people wouldn't have to potentially back into that intersection as a safety hazard. They didn't feel that was necessary off the 44th Avenue entrance, and in lieu of not trying to lose more parking, we didn't add one there.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think you have any more questions other than what I asked last time. I think we've exhausted the parking thing. I do appreciate the safety study that Hexagon at least reviewed what Dudek did. I think that answers some of my questions from last time, that if the Chevy S Suburban can make it, probably everything else can make it. So I think that's a good report. The only other thing is, and I like the proposal, this 1.5 mile thing or whatever radius we decide is the right radius, to give preferential treatment to locals, so to speak. I know, we don't want to violate the Fair Housing Act, but I'm sure some smart lawyers like yourself could figure out language that allows us to give some preference to the people in the local community.
The language that I'm actually proposing came from our city attorney.
Okay.
So
I think that would help a lot. We heard from, some of the local workers tonight that they would appreciate this, the ability at least to apply for this type of housing. And I think we should, if to the extent we can, give them preference. Other than that, I think we should move on.
Okay, Commissioner Wilk, any more comments from you?
Yeah, we were asked to stand tall on this issue. And I'm going to stand tall and ask to approve this proposal. And I don't think an appeal is going to go anywhere because we've been educated on the housing element. City Council now has been educated on the housing element and the density bonus. And we're all aware of the RENA numbers, which are 1336, which means that parking and density and traffic, this is just the beginning. We've got, once we get a housing element approved, and it may be difficult to get a housing element approved if we start disapproving these kinds of projects. But if we get a housing element approved, it means that we're going to zone for not 36 units, but 1,336 units. I think that's the right number. I may be wrong. So this is the changing Capitola that we need to prepare for. And we're going to have parking issues. We need to address those as a city and not place them on the burden of the applicants, because if we do, they're just going to fall back on the builder's remedy. And if you don't know what that is, you should look it up. So I would move that we approve the project with the conditions that staff has imposed, with the exception of changing the tenant screening statement to include the 1.5 mile radius as the chair suggested.
Okay, before we can get a second on that motion. Maybe we ought to give Commissioner Christensen.
Well, we can get a second and then move it to discussion.
Someone want to second that motion at this point? Okay, I think the motion dies for the lack of a second. We'll hear Commissioner Christensen's comments.
Like Commissioner Wilk was explaining, we do have to prepare for this 1336 housing units. The major issue I have is there's no provisions for the neighborhood concerns when it comes to these state mandates, which limits our ability to maneuver. And it's not necessarily, I think your application was really complete. The architect made a great presentation. I appreciate your attention and time on all points. I just think it's worth being said that the lack of provisions for infrastructure and neighborhood concerns is disturbing a little bit on a state level. I feel that our position is to come into these types of projects and try to work with the developers, because there's going to be more, and make these projects better. And in moving in that direction, working with other types of landowners within the vicinity to use their parking, because that's the major concern, or the permit parking. Trying to figure out how we could focus on those neighborhoods and make them better would be, an avenue for improvement. But I agreed with your sentiments just now. I think I don't have more to ask for the application. I think we've covered everything, but those are my thoughts.
For me, I think what the state has done to local communities is a really bitter pill to swallow. And that is not that, Capitola is adverse to having affordable housing. I think Capitola is a pretty unique community. I don't think most people realize that less than 50% of the housing we have in Capitola are single family houses, and many of those are quite modest on 40 by 80 foot lots. I don't think Capitola is a city that you would look at and, call an elite city or snobs. The city has worked hard over the years to try and have affordable housing. They worked with all the mobile home parks in town to help them to convert to ownership or co-op. So they were able, to maintain that housing in here, because we always have been a very diverse community. I think it's unfortunate that the state did not give us any leeway to work with people on projects, because we sort of see our goal as a planning commission is to try and make projects better for our community and actually better for the applicants and ones that are going to work. But unfortunately, the California state government has decided that that's not an appropriate avenue for us to take, that we don't get to make those decisions anymore. So we get faced with the choice of, you know, if we deny a project like this, we put the city in great jeopardy of being sued and going to court. And the reality is from the court cases that have happened so far, the project would get approved anyway. And has been mentioned at this end of the table, you know, the city's been given an enormous number of new housing units. I think 1,300, you said 1,336. And there's no consideration of the fact that we live in a county that doesn't really have a viable transit system. There's no consideration given to the fact that we live in an area where water is a problem already for the amount of people that are living here. The state has completely, in my mind, overstepped what they should be doing. And I personally think their goal of building 3.5 new housing units before 2030 is unrealistic. You know, having said all of that, I'm a planning commissioner, and we had 2 new planning commissioners join us recently. And as planning commissioners, we take an oath that says that we will abide by the laws of the state of California as far as planning matters are concerned. And I think we're really required to do that, or else we do put our city in jeopardy. And I don't think that's a decision that the Planning Commission should be making and doing. You know, if this ultimately goes to the council as the city's elected officials, you know, they can make those kinds of decisions. And as we talked about, having the 5 meeting rule limit, even though some of us may object to the first meeting being called a meeting, it technically was. Seems to me, you know, we have 2 choices. We can approve this application tonight, even though we have heard the concerns of our community and we understand that this is not what you want. Unfortunately, we're not the people who can change this. You need to look at your state elected officials and your governor if those are changes that you want to have made. So we could approve it tonight, or we could deny it tonight if we're so inclined to do that, because the city can't be sued if we deny it tonight, because it still has to go to the city council under appeal, because they have to go through their administrative remedy process before any kind of legal action can be taken. So it's sort of a dilemma. We've heard from 2 at this end that they are in favor of approving the project. And I do agree, we all need to get prepared, because if these laws stay the same way they are, the Capitola that we've all come to love and live with is not going to be the same. It's going to be different. I don't know if it's going to be completely bad, but it is going to be different. So maybe we should hear from this end of the table, which
Well,
direction you want to go.
My end of the table, I studied this a lot and I looked at the code, especially the density bonus code that the state legislature passed a few years ago. And it's pretty airtight that we can't override that with the threat of getting sued and the city getting sued. And I worked on the Finance Advisory Committee for 5 years for the city. And with Jim Malberg, we built up a pretty good coffer, including through COVID. We have a pretty good reserve that Peter talked about as a city, but I don't want that reserve to be used on lawsuits. I want that reserve to be used to make the city better. And, if we disapprove it, it will go to the city council, and city council can do whatever they want. But, I'm sort of viewing this in a defensive posture more than anything else. Unfortunately, I don't like that. And I really wish you would do something about parking, at least in the short term. Long term, I agree with somebody who said that will not be an issue. I think short term, 5 years-ish, it is an issue. So I'd encourage you to do that. But I think we're gonna have to move this thing forward and stop, just move it down the road.
Thank you. So I guess I'm at this end of the table. I'm 100% for affordable housing. My comments and questions did come from a different background from Bill Dia being a developer and understanding what codes are and trying to research them. And so my questions today were around parking was, if it's 1 to 36, 1 unit to each unit, I wanted to understand, was that actual for 36 people to park there? And I think you went through and just defined that. I have questions still about the EV. My only reason we not for supporting the project tonight would be to push the question to city council to have a question at a bigger level about how we're going to address the community's concerns about parking. Maybe that opens the door to having conversation about permit parking or restricted parking, or maybe that forces the conversation that we say you can't put on the applicant to have with other sources for parking, as Courtney was noting. And it makes that conversation happen other than, so it makes it a viable conversation that has to be discussed at our elected officials level other than a appointed level that we are here tonight. But I can tell you from the project standpoint, I have 4 daughters. None of them live in Santa Cruz County because they can't afford it. So I understand what affordable housing is.
Okay, and if we go forward with this, I actually have a couple other conditions I'd like to put on the project. And one of them is that the applicant is proposing a number of trees on site, and they're probably going to be smaller than the size that we are normally accustomed to having being planted. And the city of Capitola actually has a tree fund with a significant amount of money in it. So I wanted to include a condition that the applicant work with staff to see if there can be an arrangement for the city to make some contribution from that tree fund money, which has to go for trees, to make certain that a larger size tree can be planted in the landscaping plan. And on that note, we typically require a landscape bond on these kinds of projects. And I don't think there's anything in the state law that precludes us from asking for that. And I think typically we ask for $10,000 for 10 years. But since this is an affordable type housing project, I think it might be more appropriate to ask for $5,000 for 5 years to ensure that the landscaping is maintained on the project. And as I said, we have routinely done that on other projects similar to this. And finally, I agree with everyone. I think we need to send a strong, strong message to the city council that we're going to have to start looking at our neighborhoods. And maybe this ought to be the first neighborhood, since they're the ones that are going to be impacted first by a major new development going in, to see what we can do as far as providing more parking on the streets. Is it possible to do some diagonal parking? Is it possible to have some more traffic calming go in, some more landscaping? Is it does it make sense to have parking that has limited hours to it at certain times to make the parking work for the neighborhood? I don't know what all of those would be, but I think we should send a real clear message to the council that when they look at their next budget, this is something that we would very much like to see them do, because we've heard the concerns from the neighbors and we understand that, they're going to have problems, and we need to do what we can as a commission to try and make this project fit in and work for everyone. So with that, does someone now want to make a motion on the project?
My motion died.
Well, I can't make a motion, so maybe.
I guess I'll move that we approve this project with the concessions that we've already talked about, plus these two, if you got those recorded. I guess one of them is the city donating trees to the project.
Yeah, or funds to help it happen.
Funds, yeah. And the second one would be a landscaping.
Excuse me,
Mhm.
because these are new conditions and we haven't even heard of them yet, can we respond to them briefly?
I think at this point, if you can make it very brief.
I will make it very brief. And my only point is that the only objective standards that are in the code that were at the time the project was deemed complete can be applied generally to a Housing Accountability Act project. That said, the applicant would be amenable to working with staff to, as you mentioned, use some of the tree funds as well. I don't know if the landscaping bond is a requirement in your code, but we can definitely work with staff to talk about that as well.
Right, and we can put in wording in there which says that we want that condition if it's
So
possible.
let me get a clarification on that. Are you objecting to the landscaping bond or agreeing that that's an acceptable condition?
I don't know if it is a code requirement. If it is a code requirement, then we are not objecting to it.
So we'll say on the condition that if it is a code requirement, we will include it. If we're not allowed to do that, then it won't be included. Does that work?
We have a new section for landscaping within our code. There used to be a requirement within the 41st Avenue corridor design guidelines to collect landscape bonds. I will have to re-review our landscape section, but we can work that into it as long as it's allowed by code.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Chair Westman, if I could briefly interject.
Pardon me?
If I could just briefly interject really quick. I just want to note that I believe you had mentioned that the reason for the local employee preference condition was to reduce VMT, vehicle miles traveled. And I think it would be-
That's correct. I didn't forgot to make that statement, but that is the reason. I think that having the preferential clause for people who work within 1.5 miles really should reduce the vehicle miles traveled. And that is one of the stated goals that the state has made. And one of the reasons why we have all these new rules related to affordable housing projects.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure it's part of the record.
Yeah, so we have a motion. We have a second from Commissioner Christensen. We'll have a roll call vote.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I want to thank everybody for tonight, for everyone's patience, your comments, for being interested in what's going on in the city of Capitola.
Can I have a
And,
point of parliamentary procedure on item C?
okay,
So you chaired the item that we are continuing, but don't you have to recuse yourself from that item? So shouldn't Courtney have asked for that continuance?
yeah, I think that is technically correct. I think the staff will be able to work that out for us.
Okay with that?
Yeah.
I mean, I just went through all this training. It's just sticking in my head.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So I seem to have lost the last page of my agenda. I don't think we have anything else other than director's report.
For the director's report tonight, I have one update for you. Our SB 9 ordinance was certified by the Coastal Commission last week. So you'll recall that we had a new ordinance for SB 9 in which 4 units could be on a single family lot. And that was certified by the Coastal Commission last week. So SB 9 is now applicable throughout the whole city limit.
Okay. And are there any commission communications?
Nope.
Okay, thank you all very much. The meeting is adjourned.